Good afternoon, everybody. It is 2 p.m. We're going to call this meeting of the Washoe County School District Board of Trustees Board Policy Committee to order, and we are going to begin with our roll call, Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Madam President. President Angela Taylor.
I am here.
Vice President Andrew Cadell. I am here. Trustee Jacqueline Calvert.
Here.
Trustee Jeff Church.
Here.
Trustee Diane Nicolette.
Present.
Trustee Kurt Thigpen.
Here. Here.
We're all here and we have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Clerk. We're going to go to agenda item 1.03. This is action to adopt the agenda, and I understand we have public comment on this action, on this item, I should say. I'm not sure if the person is in here or people, and I've been told that there are a lot of people outside and there are a lot of empty seats in here. So there's certainly room for those that may want to come in and be a part of this meeting.
John Eppolito.
I don't see Mr. Eppolito.
He's wearing a Hawaiian shirt.
Okay, is there just one public comment or just one? Okay, we can't go on to. All right, just make sure he knows out there that we've called him. Mhm. All right, well, I'm trying to give him an opportunity for the public comment, but is he coming to?
I think people are starting to come in.
Well, the meeting has started, so we're going, is Mr. Eppolito on his way in?
Yes.
Okay, tell him we're holding the meeting for him, so he needs to come on so we can get going. Mr. Eppolito, your name has been called, sir, for public comment.
Pardon me?
Your name has been, you put in the public comment card, your name has been called
Yeah, okay. For 1.03.
for 1.03, yes.
My name is John Eppolito. I have 2 kids left in the district, and I have 2 that already graduated. And the reason that I put in a public comment for 1.03 is because I question 2.04. Yesterday, you published the information that you're going to talk about today. So I had 2 attorneys look at that and ask if it was a violation of open meeting law or if you're just being sneaky. One said you're just being sneaky. One said it's a violation of open meeting law. So if 2.04, since you just published it yesterday, the actual content of the policy, should you be talking about it today? And if not, please take it off the agenda. If the attorney is confident that you're not in violation of open meeting law, go for it. But if there's any question, my suggestion is take it off. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eppolito.
You're welcome.
We're on to agenda item 1.0. Oh, I'm sorry, we have a comment, council, please. I understand, yes.
I'm confident we're not in violation.
Thank you very much. I was as well. We spoke about it last week via email, so thank you for that comment, though, council. It's good to get that on the record. Okay, any other public comment for agenda item 1.03? Ladies, any more? No, none to that. Okay, we're taking agenda item 1.03. This is action to adopt the agenda. If it is the pleasure of the board, I'm looking for a motion. Moved by Clerk Manetto. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by, I'm looking at you for right, because I see your mic on. Seconded by Trustee Nicolette. Okay, discussion, Vice President Cottle.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. I just want to say that I'm opposed to the mask mandate for vaccinated individuals. Other public bodies in Washoe County and the state of Nevada have lifted the mask mandates for fully vaccinated individuals. I believe we should be in line with that, so I'm opposed. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Cottle. And what I will also say for the record, is in that, and I certainly hear you, both the superintendent and myself took some time this week to reach out to other school boards. And what we're finding is that there are school boards in alignment with us, primarily based upon what's required in the schools at this point. And that aligns us a little bit differently than another public body that doesn't have a school where there's still some mask mandates. So we're still required to stand under Governor's Directive 045. And so at this point, that is where we land ourselves as a board. Okay. So any other comments on agenda item 1.03? There is a motion on the floor and a second. No further discussion. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? I'm sorry, trustee Thigpen, I'm sorry, let me acknowledge that you're on Zoom. We know that you're taking care of yourself medically. Thank you. Was that in support of or not in support of? Give us a thumbs up or thumbs down, sir. Thumbs up. Okay, thank you very much. I'm sorry, I have to remember the pause because there's a little bit of a delay. Let the record show that the motion carries 6-1. 6-1. Okay, moving on to the agenda. We're at agenda item 2. Agenda item 2, if there are items for presentation and discussion. This is a discussion and possible action to recommend revisions and or forward the proposed revisions to board, proposed revisions to board policy 1505. This is about visitors to district property, meaningful access, specifically to update and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration. This is, again, for the public, this is for preliminary approval. And what that means is should this policy either be revised or as recommended, should it be approved, it goes on to a full meeting of the Board of Trustees. Should it get approved at that meeting of the Board of Trustees, it will go out for a 13-day public comment period and then come back to the Board of Trustees to be considered for final approval. So this is step 1 in typically a 3-step process. Okay, just for information. And before us, we have our Director of Communications and Community Engagement, Ms. Michelle Anderson.
Good afternoon, President Taylor, trustees, Dr. McNeil, Michelle Anderson, Chief Communications and Community Engagement Officer for the record. Just a little recap, if you guys will remember, on April 20th, the Board Policy Committee requested additional language be included to clarify the scope of the policy and to amend the definition of trespass. With those changes, and unanimous approval was provided at that time to move the policy forward to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. As the scope and the definition for trespass was updated as requested, we did another comprehensive deep dive of the policy to ensure that it was really clear to understand to the best of our ability, and of course format it per Board Policy 9070. Due to the substantive changes, the policy is being, of course, returned to the Board Policy Committee for review today. So as we're going through it, you'll see under purpose, we clarified the scope as requested. You guys had mentioned, does this include large events? So we made sure to outline that it does not. And for definitions, we amended the definition of trespass, which all of you had agreed upon during that April 20th meeting. And then you're going to see quite a bit of format changes. So it looks like there's a lot of changes, but really what it was shuffling some things around to make sure we were in alignment. And again, making sure we alphabetized the definitions. And then the changes since you last met, if you look on page 5 under visitor management, we included the clarifying language of, and I quote, school or district sponsored event / field trip, as you previously discussed, saying you believed it would help provide some clarification. So we made sure to add that. You will now also see green strike through from that same section starting on page 6 and through page 8. We recommend removing this language and actually including it in the admin regulation rather than policy, since that's the more appropriate location for that. Under number 2, under prohibited activities, under D1, which is on page 9, after a thorough discussion with our police chief, general counsel, and the superintendent, we recommend striking the language related to the provision about granting an exception for persons to bring weapons on school property. I do, of course, want to note that under D2, this does not apply to peace officers or school security guards. And we believe removing this language provides not only clarity, but it also aligns with the applicable Nevada revised statute. So that concludes our recommendations.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. First, I'll ask, do we have public comment on this item?
Well, I do have a public comment that has 2.01 on it from Nicole Harris.
Okay, Ms. Harris, are you here to comment on this item here, ma'am?
Yeah,
Oh.
this is the one you're talking about, right?
Awesome, yes, it is.
Sorry, I can't breathe with this thing. 2.01, that's what you're talking about.
Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm in the right place.
Then you're in the right place. You're at the right place at the right time. But I am gonna ask you though, you still have to keep that mask on if you would.
Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do it this way. How's that?
That is covered, so you're good. We gotta get your mic on though. Let's hang on till we get your mic on. Let's just make sure of that. All right, got you covered.
Okay.
Okay, ma'am, you have 3 minutes, so you're good.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
First of all, I'd like to know if this policy covers parents coming on to the school property, school district, and that's one. Second of all, does it include administration, buildings, and other venues? Or is it just the schools? Okay, so that's number one. Number two, are we talking about sidewalks, which are next to the school, or are we not talking about that? And I don't know about it because a lot of these policies and everything, they're so worded and they're so long, it's very hard to understand exactly what are we talking about. So those are the comments I have on that. The other thing is, if we're going to put this out, my question is, how soon does the public get to know about these? You know, you guys are considered the experts, the people who are in charge of the welfare of not only our students, but also our community. And for a long time, the community has not had the opportunity to have your working knowledge. So a lot of you, and that's not correct to say a lot of you, I'm thinking in Chinese. What I mean is that there are individuals who do not have the same equal access that you do to information. And I know you're very concerned about equality and equal, what do I want to say? Equality and equity. So I'm just bringing those things up. If visitor management, what does that mean? So if I'm a parent, what do I have to do to go visit a schoolroom, even if I don't have a kid in there, number one, or number two, I live in the neighborhood and I want to know what's going on in the schoolroom. Do I have a right, since I'm paying taxes, to go in? Or is there a format that I need to follow? And if there is a format or policy, what is the duty of this school board to inform me of my rights? And do I have an opportunity to say, hey, I think it's pretty good, but in our neighborhood, you need to consider these 5 things, which no one even reviewed. So those are some of my general comments on this particular item. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris. Is there other public comment? Not on this item?
No.
Okay, all right, I will bring that here to the board for some discussion and some consideration. I see you leaning in, trustee Church, is that?
Thank you. I hate to be first, but
It's okay, somebody's got to be.
what somebody, yeah. I think the speaker did raise some good questions. If maybe we can discuss those or address some of those during this discussion. One of the things dealing with sidewalks, and just for the sake of the audience, in my opinion, I was recently asked about what I really knew about before called free speech zones. And that's a really good question. I just don't think it belongs under this policy, but free speech zones are essentially where you could set up a table and hand out flyers, say at the parking lot entrance or whatever. But I just don't think that's, and I could be wrong. I think that's more political activity in schools, not this policy. And then just for the record, at the last meeting, I did get onto this thing, an explanation that if you go to a football game, not everybody has to sign in. You sign in when you go to a school, to meet a principal or whatever. You don't have to sign in when you go to a football game. And then finally, I do have a question about, and I think it's number E or I, I'll read the thing and then we can figure out where it is. Don't ask me to pronounce the word secret or unauthorized electronic surveillance recording on any school property without knowledge of the person being observed. I thought legally you could
Okay,
record.
I'm sorry, what page you have on, trustee Church?
I
So can
wish I
follow you?
knew. I wish I knew.
Just slide your. Page nine, thank you.
Thank you.
And you said which one was that? E?
I think it changed to I.
It's E. I was
E.
gonna say, I don't think it's I. E. Okay.
Okay.
Surreptitious.
Yes, there
Okay.
you go. Thank
Okay.
you.
Uh-huh. Go
I
ahead.
thought that legally you could record, and I mean, somebody again, just recording an event, a musical event, everybody's got their cell phones and they all record, and I'm a little concerned about that, if we could discuss that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm gonna ask council to weigh in.
First of all, it's surreptitious, which means hidden or secret. So if I'm recording a play, let's say, or child student's performance, that's not surreptitious, and that actually is state law. So that's why it's in there.
Okay, thank you, council. Trustee Church, were you
Yeah,
get more?
I'm really confused. So if I'm meeting, let's just say I'm meeting one-on-one with somebody on or off school property, is it illegal for me to have my tape recorder running secretly in my pocket?
I can't speak to off-school property because I'm not the off-school property attorney, but on-school property, it would be illegal, yes.
And is that a specific NRS that deals with school property?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, trustee Church. Other comments? Questions from this, Vice President Cottle?
Thank you, Madam President. Right above E, where it's DI, it's mentioned school security guards. I'm curious of why that's in there. I read it as like a private security. We don't employ private security guards. So I'm just curious on what that would be. Because my understanding is our officers are considered peace officers. And so are we saying, like, in case of security, we hire a security firm? If you could help me with that.
Thank you, trustee Cottle. Yes, that would be if we did hire, say, outside police officers or security officers that would be armed. We would have obviously an agreement with them. Say we had a large event where we needed to have additional, so that was just to cover us. But you are absolutely correct. Our officers with school police are sworn officers, so they would fall underneath that category.
Okay, and then number 1, it would be under B.
What page?
It would
Vice
be
President Cottle?
page 5. It's at the bottom of the page. It doesn't have a number or letter where it talks about the district shall bar members of the general public from attending meetings of the board, shall not bar members of the general public from attending meetings of the board without prior knowledge of and approval by the president of the board. There was no explanation there. In what instance would that actually be appropriate?
So
That is a good question.
if you had somebody who had a restraining order against a specific individual, I think that would be a perfect example. Obviously, they would be notified ahead of time that they've had that restraining order, so it's not a surprise when that individual would show up at a board meeting. I think that is a very rare occurrence because as we all know, the board and I would say district staff encourage the public to be attending meetings, but there is that rare occurrence. I know when I worked at the city of Reno, we did have a significant threat. This was several years ago. That person was obviously notified because they did have a legal restraining order, and so they received that notification.
No, thank you. And go ahead.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Council?
I just thought I'd add, I totally agree with what Ms. Anderson said. That's one example. Another example might be someone who is slanderous, belligerent, repetitious to an extreme extent, and all of those terms that we talk about in the open meeting law. So what the president would do is give the person a warning, that's your knowledge, and then say, if you keep doing this, you're out. And that would be a time that a person could be barred from a public meeting also.
Okay, thank you. In the policy, it specifically mentions means of the board. Do we need to adjust that to include other public bodies that we have where it's not the board? Because technically this is not a board meeting when we're in today. I mean, do we need to cover public bodies somewhere in this?
That's a good point.
We have in board policy, can't remember the number off the top of my head, but all the rules, one of the policies that we drafted for public bodies, I believe it's 9100, says that all the standard rules that apply to the Board of Trustees apply to all of our public bodies. So we did that on purpose because we didn't want to create, we have, at last count, I believe 14 different public bodies. We didn't want to create 14 different sets of rules. So how you, as the governing body, when you sit as the Board of Trustees, not as the Board Policy Committee, however you manage your meeting is the expectation of all public bodies in our district.
Great, thank you. And my last question is in regards to sidewalks and visitors to schools. To my knowledge, a sidewalk, if it's city property, it would not fall under board policy, correct?
I'm going to jump in on that. I just asked council to address some of those questions, if you will,
Okay,
and that was
okay.
one of them. So if you don't mind, we can, did you have another question or can we
That's
just
it for
segue
me.
into that?
That's it.
Okay, thank you, Vice President Cottle.
Yeah, to be clear, our board policies only cover our property and don't cover sidewalks that are outside of our property. I guess one area of minor confusion might be, I know certain high schools will have what appears to be a sidewalk, right? Like Devani Ranch or North Valleys or Spanish Springs, where they have what appears to be a sidewalk on our property. That's not a free speech area. That's not free speech. That's Washoe County School District property. If you have a sidewalk that surrounds our property and it is part of the city, then that's city government property, and that would be potentially a free speech. There is some limitations even on that if it's interfering with public education, but I'm giving generalizations. Does that make sense? So we're not trying to govern sidewalks, and we can't govern sidewalks.
Thank you, council. There were maybe a couple others that I'll ask you to address as well. Thank you. Would, yeah, please. I thought the public commenter just had some, they're probably good general questions for the public, so.
Sure. I think one of the questions was, does this apply to parents? Yes. What we don't want, how Washoe County School District looks to manage its properties is to avoid disruption of the education process. So just because you pay taxes doesn't mean you can just walk into any building you want, any place you want, at any time you want. The perfect example of that is you pay taxes for the federal courthouse. You don't get to walk into the judge's chambers. You pay taxes for the local courthouse. You don't get to walk into a judge's chambers. You pay taxes for Washoe County Police Department or Reno Police Department. You don't just get to go where you want. So visitors need to be managed just like I shouldn't say that. The school property needs to be managed just like any other public property. And so we're there to educate children, and that is our highest goal. And so all of this is to avoid disruption of children. I would also point out that the school board's policy specifically says we encourage visitors. We just also need to protect our students as they try to learn. So I think that answers one of the questions. Mm-hmm. Does this apply to administrative buildings? Yes. Again, you don't get to, any member of the public doesn't get to go just anywhere they want. There's overwhelming law on this. And so it does apply to administrative buildings as well. Obviously, it would be a little different. You can set appointments with people if they're willing to take an appointment with you, but no one's required to take appointments. Sidewalks, I think I answered that. And I have notes to say about football games. I think we've covered that. We've covered the surreptitious recordings. So I think I've covered all of my notes anyway.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate that, counsel. I think that was pretty comprehensive. Thank you. And those were good questions. Dr. Nicolette?
Yes, just to extend on that, and I've had quite a few discussions about, the public property of public schools and taxpayer supported, and whether it's local monies or state monies or federal monies. I think a distinction that I would like everyone to remember is that the students inside those buildings are not public property. They are from parents and families, and whatever the dynamics of the family is, they are not public property. Therefore, having people just running around, walking around in good intentions, wanting to see what's going on, curious, how's our money being spent? I love being around children. They're not public property. Therefore, we do have to have policies that keep our students and our staff safe. And I would like to go back to page 5. I'm a little uncomfortable with the open-endedness of the district shall not bar members of the general public. Yes, of course.
I'm sorry, can you tell us where you are, Dr.
Oh,
Nicolette?
yes.
Page 5.
Page
I
5,
see page 5, but where?
very bottom, sorry. Doesn't have a
Okay,
number yet.
Okay,
It's-
I got you, I got you. Very bottom. Thank you.
My thought is that of the board continuing, without the prior knowledge and approval of the president of the board, let's have a clarification here. So the board president, in this case, Dr. Taylor, would not make a decision unless she in fact has information that qualifies someone to be disqualified. So technically, the board president isn't making the decision. She's making the decision through information that was obtained, correct? It's not like, it sounds so willy-nilly this way.
I will say this, I hear your point. I think it does need to be clear that whether it's myself or anybody else, a board president can't just say, oh, I don't like so-and-so, they can't come. It's really, so I hear what you're saying. It's really, if there should be a reason, and then it's coming to the board president saying, hey, based upon this restraining order or whatever that case may be, we'd like to bar this person from the band, whatever the case may. I hear what you're saying. Sure. And I think that's a clear distinction because it needs to be very clear that it's not subjective. Mhm. Is there, you have a recommendation on maybe the wording on that, or?
I'll look at it.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Were you going to respond, counsel, or? You showed that, I see trustee Church, okay?
Yeah, I agree. I hadn't noticed that, and a good catch. And I would also say that they should have some right to appeal to the board. In writing, they don't have to be here if they've, and somebody said restraining order. This doesn't require a restraining order. This simply says, a lot of times people say somebody's mentally ill and they just totally act out. It doesn't require a restraining order. We just issue them the trespass warning and bar them. So yeah, there should be an appeal process.
Okay, so your recommendation, trustee Church, then? I mean, I know you're saying for appeals process,
I
but
would say the district shall not bar members of the general public for attending meetings of the Board of Trustees without cause.
Yeah.
And then say, any person so barred shall be entitled to a appeal process to the board.
okay, we don't have many appeals, because then that means it becomes something that's discussed at an open meeting. I don't know that I will be comfortable with that on behalf of the person. Right? I mean, it's then you're saying, let me just make this up. Then you're saying that Andrew Cottle guy, it's an agenda item, and now we have to notice him ahead of time. And now in the public meeting, we're saying Andrew has a restraining order. Do you guys think we should ban him? I'm a little hesitant over. I hear what you're saying, and I'm certainly not opposed, but to say it like that, I don't know if we want to do a member of the public like that.
Well, I would add maybe 3 words or 2 words, upon their request.
Okay, well, yeah, there's some things that need to be worked out, but it's something to consider. All right, I appreciate that. Counsel?
I'm not going to weigh in on whether or not on the appeal process, except to say that if you do an open meeting, then it brings into account NRS 241.033 and NRS 241.034 and actually 030, which then you're getting into somebody's competence, character, alleged misconduct. You're going to have to do noticing requirements. You may have a closed meeting. It may be open. Very difficult to manage that situation. And I don't think that a time bar from a public meeting can be ad infinitum. It can't be forever. It has to end. So I think it's for example, going back to the TRO, which I think is a really good example, is a TRO ends after 6 months. So when the TRO is no longer in effect, that person gets to come back. It's a public meeting. So I think that's how that would get managed. if you do an appeal process, I would just ask that you keep that in mind, because it's a very difficult meeting to manage, but we could do it. That tends to be where most of your violations occur when you look at the open meeting law manual. I do like the term cause. I actually suggested the term legal cause before trustee Church spoke, and I do think that's a good idea. I had without legal cause in there at one point. Again, I've taken out the word legal. We could always put that back in. Legal cause, again, temporary restraining order. The open meeting law says you don't get to come up here and defame people, slander people, be vulgar, be belligerent, yell at people, those type of things. So that might be a good term as well.
Well, that may be something, I probably feel a little bit more comfortable with that than the Haiti appeal piece because of what, and I would be a little concerned about us as a board having that conversation about a community member, and that, I mean, wow, who knows what that could get into. I think if we have, I would be more comfortable with a without cause or legal cause. Because again, we want to take the subjectivity out of here. I get that. I mean, I like to think I'm going to be as fair as all get out, right? I'm human. Maybe I'm going to screw up. Hopefully I won't, but I won't. These aren't decisions based upon me. It's based upon whomever's in this seat, right? And I think taking the subjectivity out of it, I think protects the person and protects the board. And again, I'm concerned about doing a member of the public like that. So those are just my comments. I see other lights. Clerk Manetto, and then Trustee Nicolette.
Thank you. Well, I don't know if this is a good thought, but it says approval by the president. Should we add and vice? Viewing the same thing, but I don't know if we need that.
Yeah, but that's another way to look at maybe some balance in there, is trying to take some of the subjectivity out of it. Okay, I hear that. Dr. Nicolette and then Trustee Church.
Well, let me just try this sentence. I'm not beholden to it. The district shall not bar members of the general public from attending meetings of the board without legal cause. The end. And then it's a matter of process. This is a policy. This is a 50,000-foot view thing. And then I would suggest that then the administrative regulations provides a little more detail.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Trustee Church.
Thank you. Again, my concern. So Jose Cuervo comes in, speaks, maybe with a little help from alcohol, and then he gets barred. And he says, I want an appeal. Doesn't he get one?
Okay, I hear you. Other comments? The only thing I would add to what you suggested, Dr. Nicolette, is there should be something in here where the board, because it's the board meeting. Otherwise, the district can bar someone, which is okay. But I do think there should be some culpability, some response, some involvement at some level. Maybe it's as you said, without cause, and the prior knowledge and approval of the board president and vice president. There should be some, otherwise, in theory, the board can say, we don't want these three, the district can say, we don't want these three people coming, and we don't know anything about it. And it's a board meeting, and we're the community representatives. I think as a board, we should know if that's happening. Right? But again, I'm good with taking the subjectivity out. It's just a matter of landing where that may land. I see council, then I see Vice President Caldwell.
Oh, no, take trust.
Vice President Caldwell first, okay.
Thank you. I hear what's being said with taking out the board president. I think where I would be cautious is we have to think about these as positions and not people. And what if the superintendent and the board president don't like each other very much? And the assumption would be where the board president would know. What happens if board president doesn't know, and then all of a sudden this stuff's happening, we're being told these things, and there isn't anybody that knows, because maybe council would advise the board president to send the board an email, just so we're all aware. So then we all are aware of what's going on. I think that's where I go to, where if the board president and the superintendent don't like each other very much, they don't talk a lot, and that communication won't happen. If it's in here, it has to happen, or else you have a board policy violation. So that'd be my thought.
Thank you, Vice President Cottle. Council?
Yeah, I agree with Vice President Cottle. I think this ultimately rests with the board, and these are you manage your meetings, not the district. So I would suggest that, and I like what trustee Nicolette wrote. I think it's very clean. I would just recommend taking out the term "the district" and put in the term "the board president." And then just basically would read, "The board president shall not bar members of the general public from attending meetings of the board without legal cause." And this way the rest with the board president, as Vice President Cottle pointed out earlier, that would be your chairperson for our other public bodies. And so this way I feel like that's accomplishes this and is clean.
Well, the legal cause thing takes a lot of the subjectivity out of it, because you can't make up a legal reason. It's either is or isn't, right? So thank you for that,
So
Council. Dr. Nicolette?
thank you. We keep referring, I interrupted because I don't want to lose it. We keep referring to prior knowledge or having some knowledge. What if it happens like Diane is doing public comment and somehow she goes ballistic? So that's not prior. We're not sure about legal cause at that point. So does that cover that as well? That unknowing event that happens?
Yeah, I think it covers it better actually, because if it just ends as you suggested without legal cause, period, and you get rid of the prior knowledge and approval of the board president, move the board president to the beginning of the sentence, then it's just saying legal cause. And legal cause is if somebody goes ballistic or becomes obscene or threatening or defaming a trustee, name calling, all of those things, that's legal cause right there. Now, I always suggest to a chair, give the person a warning, give them a chance to cool off. But if they choose not to, then they may be barred for the rest of that meeting. So this actually fits that scenario better the way you suggested, I believe.
And if we may, just for all of us, and can we read where we are in terms of the changes, so we know what it is that we're considering at this point? Wait, Vice President Carver wants to weigh in first.
Yeah, I can make a motion for what was said, because I
Okay.
know General Counsel made the language, so have a trustee
That's
make
even
the
better.
language. So the board president shall not bar members of the general public from attending meetings of the board without legal cause, period.
Dave, there was a motion on the floor. Is there a second? Okay, seconded by, a motion on the floor by Vice President Cobble, seconded by Clerk Manetto. Further discussion? Yes.
I'm
Trustee
just going to
Church?
oppose on the grounds that I think there ought to be some kind of an appeal process.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you. Sorry about that. I was being, yes,
Diane.
Dr. Nicolette, you, the one over
You down
there.
there.
Yeah.
So trustee Church, I'm wondering, I hear what you're saying. And so is that not already available to a person that they can do an appeal? I mean, that's already an opportunity, correct?
Well, I don't think it depends on the circumstance. If it's a restraining order, of course they can appeal it, but that's not your guys' appeal to hear. So you're not going to get, so what? I mean, you can sit here and say, I want Jose Cuervo to attend. I don't care that it's a restraining order. And a district court judge is going to say, well, I do. And guess what? Jose Cuervo is not attending. That's the way it goes. You don't have the authority to override a judge. With regard to the example that was given by Trustee Church, again, legal cause. So if he shows up intoxicated and is inappropriate during the meeting while intoxicated and is removed for that day, that's legal cause. That legal cause doesn't extend to the next meeting. Jose Cuervo is allowed to attend the next meeting, or any person, whoever we're talking about here, is allowed to attend the next meeting because there's no more legal cause. So again, if you do appeal process, that's an incredibly complicated board meeting. And I just can't imagine the board wants to go down that road of talking about its citizens, but that's up to the board.
Thank you, counsel. Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Vice President Carter?
Thank you, Madam President. Where I am on the appeal is there's really, as legal counsel talked about, two different scenarios. If it's restraining order, we don't have the authority to override district judge, as an example. If it's a current public comment, that appeal wouldn't have been agendized, so we couldn't actually hear it at that meeting. We'd have to hear it at a future meeting, and at that point, it's not in place anymore because it was for that point in time. So I don't know where a scenario would come up to where the appeal would actually render any type of resolution that would make sense with the situation. At least I can't think of one. So, thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Call. Trustee Church?
Yes, again, most generally, the trespass warnings are for 6 months. If we're saying, and we put that in writing, when you 86 somebody or tell them they have to leave for one meeting, that's one thing. We're talking about generally somebody you say you're trespassed, you're 86, no restraining order. They don't get a day in court. You're 86 for 6 months and you have no appeal. And again, you keep saying, or folks keep saying, well, what about their privacy? I'm talking about where they request, they waive their right to privacy. We're not talking about them in a capacity as a school employee where we're talking about their character and all that the Nevada Revised Statute applies. A citizen speaks, he gets 86 or she, and Jose Cuervo has done the talking for me in my younger days. So I've been there. So what about an appeal? They want an appeal. They want their day in court, their day to be heard. And this does not give them any kind of a process.
Thank you, Trustee Church. Counsel?
So you do have the ability, if you are trespassed from the Washoe County School District, you do have the right to appeal that trespass. So if that trespass was overruled, then this wouldn't apply at that point, right? But that goes to the trespass. That doesn't really go, so that's what gets appealed is the trespass. And yes, there is an appeal process for a trespass. So if that's the concern, then that is addressed.
So basically then, just based upon what you're saying, then I see you, Trustee Calvert, is that if the trespass is appealed, then therefore there's no more legal cause based upon this that we're considering right now, then just say me as the president, right? Let's say Jose Cuervo gets trespassed because, little too much, right? And then Jose Cuervo appeals, whatever that process is that's already in place. And then it's like, oh, you know what, the appeal was granted, then therefore the president, I have no more legal cause to ban this person from. So really the appeal comes down to whatever the legal cause is, there are appeals in place for those legal causes. Yes. Understandable. Okay. I just needed that clarity in my own mind.
I would suggest, just let me point out one thing though, just to be clear, because I don't want it to come back and say, well, you didn't point this out. There's no appeal for the open meeting law violation, which is if somebody comes in as obscene, vulgar, all those different things. But again, the legal cause only extends to the end of that meeting.
Right.
The next meeting, it's a whole new chapter. It's a clean slate. Doesn't matter that you yelled at us last meeting and used vulgarity and obscenity and those things. This is a new meeting. So the legal cause has ended upon the conclusion of that meeting.
Thank you, counsel. Trustee Calvert?
Neil, I just am having a hard time understanding the pill because it sounds like we're trying to be judge and jury at the same time. So how do we, and if we have the appeal, like you said, we're looking at people's personal business that I personally, I don't want people in my business. And I don't want to be into the business of people that come to our meetings. So is there a way that we can process this where we're not feeling like it's a process where like we're being judge and jury?
Yeah, I think if you have the appeal in front of the board, what the open meeting law says is if the board is going to consider any person's character or competence, alleged misconduct, and it actually talks about health issues as well, you have to put their name on the agenda. You give them the right to go into a closed session. You have to put on your agenda that you're going to go into a closed session. You have to put the purpose on the agenda. So to your point, if I'm understanding you correctly, yeah, you're going to embarrass a member of the public. So instead, what I'm suggesting is you already have an appeal process for a trespass, which is done not in open and not by this public body, and it is done by an administrator. And and it's not a single administrator, it's a panel. And our office sits on the panel. to school police sits on the panel and another administrator, I believe it's 3 people. And so that is a better process, right? Because you're not dragging a member of the public through an open meeting exposing what may or may not have been done. And so I agree with your point. I think that's the better process. I don't think this is just my opinion. You guys need to make your own decision. I think there's enough due process in other areas to not have it in this area. That's just my opinion, though.
Thank you, counsel, and thank you, trustee Calvert. Trustee Church, and then I'm going to call for the question. I'm going to address something else in a minute.
So that changes everything. My whole thing, the whole thing, I thought we were going to long-term 86. Could we do a friendly amendment to say for the duration of the meeting? Because that's what I just heard, I think.
Well, my only issue on that would be if it's because of that, but if it's something that's like a TPO or something like that, that extends beyond the meeting, then we would be limiting that, right? So if it were some of those other issues, if it's that temporary thing as you're talking about, then that's one thing, but there are other reasons why someone might be banned that were already shared by Ms. Anderson and by counsel.
Okay, but just for what I'm hearing, again, it changes everything. So if they're 86, trespass warning, there is a written procedure for them to address it.
Yeah, let me see if I can make this clearer, because I probably messed you up. Is legal cause can be any number of things. And I think I said restraining order. I meant protection order. So you have a temporary TPO against somebody, right? Then the person would not be allowed to come in the meeting. Doesn't matter. Their appeal goes through the courts, not through you. If it's trespass, then they have the right to appeal the trespass, which goes through a panel, not through the board of trustees. Then if it's an open meeting law, if it's an inappropriate public comment under the open meeting law, then that person is barred from the meeting only for the rest of that meeting. And it's as if it never occurred at the next meeting of the public body. So does that help you? Did I make that better?
Yeah, absolutely. And I might point out that under 241 NRS, they've got a right to appeal open meeting law to the Attorney General.
Yep, they do.
So it sounds as though the appeal process is already built in. I am aware that there was a late edition of public comment. Public comment for this issue has closed. However, when this comes before the board, which it will at some upcoming time and the board considers, because this group makes a recommendation to the Board of Trustees. Should the Board of Trustees accept the recommendation of the Board Policy Committee with unsubstantial changes and so on, then it goes out for a 13-day period for public comment. So that will be an additional time when public comment is allowed. But we've already had public comment on this item. So unfortunately, I'm sorry, that card that came in late, we won't be able to accommodate you today, but there'll be another time. And we certainly encourage you to continue to be involved and share your comments on this item. Okay, seeing more, we're going to go ahead with the question. Again, there is a motion on the floor. The motion was made by trustee Cottle that it reads, the district shall not bar members of the general public, and I'm sorry, the board president shall not bar members of the general public from attending meetings of the board without legal cause, period. It was a motion on the floor, trustee Cottle, seconded by clerk Minetto. I did not check in with you, trustee Thigpen. You didn't weigh in, so I think that you're good. Did you don't have any other discussion? I'll pause for a moment to give you a chance to jump in if you'd like.
No, I have no other thoughts.
Oh, okay, thank you so much, trustee Thigpen. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposition? Oh, sorry, dang it. Now I'll say it. Opposition. All right, the motion is carried. Let the record show it is unanimous. And again, this will go to an upcoming meeting of the Board of Trustees. Last time I said it's going to be on the particular meeting, and then it didn't happen, so I'm not saying that.
So I can make another
Oh, that was just a
motion.
motion for this, just for this piece, not for the, I'm sorry, you're right. Thank you.
I mean,
So
if
now we
we're-
have, yes,
If we're good, I can make a motion for the whole policy.
yes.
I move the Board Policy Committee approves the revisions of Board Policy 1505, visitors to district property, meaningful access with the amendment, and forwards the policy to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval.
Second?
Thank you, Vice President Carlos. Motion on the floor is seconded by Dr. Nicolette. Seeing no further discussion. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? The motion is carried. Let the record show it is unanimous. Now we have that, and it will appear on an upcoming meeting of the Board of Trustees. We're going to go on to agenda item 2.02. Discussion and possible action to forward the proposed deletion of Board Policy 3360, teacher reimbursement for school supplies, which was mandated by Senate Bill 324 from the 2019 legislative session, because all provisions of the law have been deleted, changed, or there is no funding for this program as changed by the 2021 funding bill, which was Senate Bill 458. And as a result, the policy and accompanying regulations are no longer needed to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration for preliminary approval. And again, this is for action, and we go to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Mathers.
May I? We're on
Did I skip it?
2.02, easy to make these mistakes,
Did I do?
which is really about,
Oh, we had a double number. Okay, it says 2.0. Okay, we're actually, so. Yeah, but we can just go ahead and do this one,
Yeah,
Cal.
we can. You can take
Why don't we
mine.
just go out of order, because we have two 2.01s on here. At least on mine, I have two 2.01s.
I do not. I have 2.02 on mine. These things happen. This gets very complicated. Policy 3265, equipment and
Yeah,
property.
I understand, but it says it's another 2.01 on mine. There's a typo, there's no problem. We're gonna stay right here with Board Policy 3360, and then we'll go back and catch that one. Okay, thank you, Dr. Nicolette.
You betcha.
Yeah, mine says different. All right, no problem. Here we are. Mr. Mathers.
Thank you very much. Mark Mathers, Chief Financial Officer. Again, we are reviewing Board Policy 3360, teacher reimbursement for school supplies. So for those who've been around for a number of years, there was a teacher supply reimbursement program. It was funded by the state. It was a grant program. There were various issues with it. And in 2019, we worked hard to streamline the program. And we were actually successful in getting that legislation through. But that legislation in 2019 required each governing body of a school district to outline in a policy how teachers would be reimbursed. And so there were various options a school district could avail themselves of, including an upfront cash payment like we chose to do. Reimbursement with receipts was another option in the way it had been done in the past, or even debit cards. All of those were options. And so the legislation required our board, along with every other school district board, to state in policy how teachers were to be reimbursed. And so we have such a policy. Unfortunately, in the most recent legislative session, that program has been defunded. There is no money for the teacher supply reimbursement program funded in next biennium's budget. And therefore, we recommend deletion of this policy and the accompanying regulation. And then when this program is refunded, hopefully, we can bring back the policy under the specific language in that bill whenever that comes. So that's the sum of my explanation in terms of why we're proposing deletion of this policy.
Thank you, Mr. Mather. We'll take it. Do we have any public comment on this?
There's no public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. To bring it here to the board, Dr. Nicolette?
Thank you. And I was sad to see that end. I mean, I understand, but I'm really sad about it. So looking to the future, we do have an administrative regulation 3361. And in there, I noticed that will still be some mechanisms for teachers. My question really is, are we going to be able to hop to it by the beginning of the next school year? Because we know that teachers spend money out of their own pocket. Sometimes nobody even knows it. Are there going to be strategies, mechanisms so that teachers can go back to the way it was so they can be reimbursed following whatever approval process there might be?
Well, so again, Mark Mathers, Chief Financial Officer, there is no funding. There was no funding proposed in the governor's recommended budget. There is no funding in the state budget for this program, and therefore for us to receive any funding to provide to teachers for this reimbursement. Now, they are allowed a tax credit, a federal tax credit, up to $250 for supplies they purchase. And so that goes through, them filing their IRS tax return. So that's available, but there is no monies provided for beginning in fiscal year 22 and in fiscal year 23 for reimbursement of supplies costs, unfortunately.
That's from the state.
That's from the state.
So not to be pushy on this, because I know that we have to figure things out and fiscal management's a complex beast. When teachers, of course, we have summer school, but let's talk about August. When teachers return in August, will principals have an opportunity to say, Teacher Diane Nicolette, go ahead and buy that for your class? And I can reimburse you, or I know I'm getting in the weeds here, but I'm thinking about our teachers.
Yeah, and I
I
appreciate.
think, if, I'm sorry if I may, Mr. Matter, let's have the superintendent weigh in because that just has to do with the district-wide, if you would.
So just to clarify, this was state funding. And so then that grant has sunsetted. So there's no longer any funding for that. And this is not in the amended budget that is coming forward to the trustees and that the trustees have seen. So there is no additional funding for teachers. Obviously, we will continue to work and advocate, but at this point in time, there is no additional funding for that. Now, as you know, in Title I schools, supplies and materials, you are eligible. You are able to use your Title I dollars for supplies, warehouse supplies, paper, pencils. And so students should not have to, well, students and,
Oh, gotcha.
right? So students should not have to purchase additional supplies for that. And that typically would come out of the teacher's pocketbook as well, too.
Just it, Dr. Nicolette, sounds like that what your conversation should be more about on the budget item, because that's a separate item than what this is, it sounds like. I hear your heart in it. Okay, we just can't do that here. Okay, can't do that here. Any other questions? This is on agenda item to be, make sure I'm correct, 2.02. This is on 2.02.
2.03.
And so I reversed them,
Yeah,
okay.
you reversed
All right, I wanted to get back to, all right. Let me make this as clear as mud. I got it. Yeah,
You're on this one.
okay. All right, yes, trustee Thigpen. I got it.
Thank you, Madam President. And I apologize if I missed part of this, if trustee Nicolette already brought it up. I'm curious if there's still any chance we can use ESSER's funding to shore this up is my first question. And the second would be, are we going to be looking to our community partners like Education Alliance's teacher, I think they call it a teacher warehouse, to make that more available, working with, the community and private partners to help, contribute to supplies so that hopefully our teachers won't have to spend as much money on supplies now that the state funding is going away.
Thank you, trustee Thigpen. Mr. Mathers, Superintendent McNeil, who wants to jump in on that?
Good afternoon, trustee Thigpen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So at this point in time, the ESSER's 2 grant has already been turned in, and we're awaiting approval for that from the state, and you all have approved that grant. And then right now, as you know, we're putting together plans for the ESSER $3. And at this point in time, with the survey data that we received, teacher supplies were not on that priority list as far as for ESSER's $3. To your question, as far as the Pie Warehouse and Education Alliance, we will always continue to work with the Education Alliance and the offer of support, whether it's through, other contractors and such, to donate to the Pie Warehouse for teachers so that they would be able to go to the Pie Warehouse and get those supplies.
I'm going to jump in here because I've been kicked by council that we're talking about a budget item, which is not on the agenda. And we need to make sure that we remain in compliance with what our agenda states. So again, let me get this right. Third time's a charm. 2.03. 2.03. I want to make sure it's really clear though. 2.03 to make sure I update my notes that I have here. This is any further discussion on agenda item 2.03. Vice President Cottle,
Make a motion.
please, sir.
I move the Board Policy Committee approves the proposed deletion of Board Policy 3360, teacher reimbursement for school supplies, and forwards the policy to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration and preliminary approval.
Motion on the floor. Is there a second? Second, motion on the floor by Vice President Cottle, seconded by Trustee Calvert. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
I paused. Okay, any opposition?
No.
Okay, let the record show that the motion carries. It carries 6-1. The motion's approved. It carries 6-1. Okay, now we're going to go back to 2.02. 2.02. This is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revisions to Board Policy 3265, which is equipment and property, specifically to update and clarify language to a future regular meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration. We'll continue to have you before us. Our Chief Financial Officer, Mark Mathers. Again, this is agenda item 2.02. I want to make sure I didn't confuse anybody. 2.02. Okay, Mr. Mathers?
Thank you, Madam President. Mark Mathers, Chief Financial Officer. Joining me today is Mr. Robert Carson, our Assistant Controller, and he is going to provide an overview of recommended changes to this policy and what we think are non-controversial changes.
Thank you, Mark. Excuse me. As he said, my name is Robert Carson. I'm the Assistant Controller here for the district, for the record. So just to go through, this is just updating language to reflect our current policies or our current practices in the department in regards to equipment and property. So the first section, the definitions, we added 3 different definitions. We added the capital asset, the GAAP, which stands for Generally Accepted Accounting Principles, and GASB, which stands for the Government Accounting Standards Board. So we added those 3. The other 3 definitions remained the same. The next section under policy, the first 5 is just a formatting change. We didn't make any changes to that. But under section 5, you'll see some additions, so B through E. And what we were doing there is just trying to spell out who's responsible for the maintenance and the accountability of certain asset classes. So the transportation department's in charge of the fleet for the district and things like that. So just making additions onto that. And then section 6 is a brand new section about accounting for fixed assets. So we've never had that section in there, but we thought it was important to include how we actually disclose those financial assets for the district. So we report capital assets in our district-wide financial statements at the end of the year. So section 7, sorry, if I'm going too quick, please just holler at me. Section 7, there was no real change to that one. We had some language added and then took it back out because we didn't feel like it was relevant. And then section 8 stayed the same minus a few wording changes in there. So.
Thank you, Robert. I don't know if this is your first time before the Board of Trustees, so welcome.
Thank you. I think it might be the second.
Might be the second,
Yes.
okay. Well, welcome nonetheless. Okay, before us, we have agenda item 2.02. Do we have any public comment, Jeannie, on this item?
No public comment.
Okay, thank you very much, and we'll come bring it to the board. Okay, questions, comments on this agenda item 2.02? Seems fairly straightforward, but we'll bring it here to the board. If there are no questions or concerns on it, and I'm also looking to you, Trustee Thigpen. Oh, I see your camera's off, so never mind. Just looking, if not, then I'm looking for a motion if it is the pleasure of the board.
So moved.
Dr. Nicolette?
I move.
Oh,
that-
I heard a so move. He beat you to it. I heard a so move by Trustee Thigpen.
I
Is
was
there a
gonna
second?
Read it.
Is there, it will take it as a second, Dr. Nicolette?
Absolutely second.
There's a motion on the floor by Trustee Thigpen. There is a second. Any discussion? And let me just make sure we know what we're going. This is agenda item 2.02. This is that the Board Policy Committee approved the revisions. There are no revisions. I guess there is. It's a deletion, right, of Board Policy 3265, equipment and property, and for the property, God bless you, the policy to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. Okay, any discussion from the table? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? The motion is carried. Let the record show it is unanimous. It is unanimous. That is agenda item 2.02. Thank you, thank you to you both. All right, now on to agenda item 2.04. 2.04. This is discussion and possible action to recommend revisions to and/or forward the proposed revision of Board Policy 9210, Equity and Diversity, specifically to update and clarify language to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. Before us, we see Dr. Paul Lamarca and Tiffany Young, Director of Equity and Diversity. The floor is yours.
President Taylor, Superintendent McNeil, members of the board. Excuse me. For the record, Paul LaMarca, Chief Strategies Officer. Thank you for this opportunity to bring this policy back to you for possible revision. I'm just going to cover some brief history, and then I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Young to cover any changes that she feels that we ought to discuss. And then, of course, we'll open it up to questions to the board. This board policy is not a new board policy. It was originally passed in 2015. It was revised again in 2019. It went in front of the board in fall of 2020, approximately a month after the board had passed the anti-racism resolution. And so the board directed us at that time to review the policy for other possible changes. That's why it's coming back to you at this particular time. I would like to just point out that this is a long-standing policy. This was a key piece of Envision 2015 and then the update to Envision 2020. That is a commitment to equity and diversity. And that was included in your core beliefs that are also a part of the bridge document at this particular time. You know, we might go back as far as the 90s with the reauthorization of ESEA, the Elementary Secondary Education Act, and most notably in early 2000s under President George Bush, the No Child Left Behind Act, in which we were, as school districts, as states, required to analyze and look at disparities in performance and address those. All schools, all teachers are held accountable to equitable access for all students and with the intent of improving the performance of all students and narrowing achievement gaps. So I wanted to provide you just a little bit of a context because this is not a new policy. I'd like Ms. Young now, if she would like to cover some of the changes that you do see.
Hello, for the record again, Tiffany Young, Director of Equity and Diversity. Thank you for having me, President Taylor, Superintendent McNeil, the rest of our trustees. As Dr. LaMarca mentioned, this is not a new policy, and we at the beginning took a great deal of time, work, effort, and energy to ensure that we developed a policy that would address the equity and diversity work across the district system-wide. What you'll notice is a couple of things that have taken place. Initially, the policy went back to the Board Policy Review Committee, one, to clarify language and ensure that the policy was in line with all other policies across this district. Additionally, we did some work and talked with our Equity and Diversity Task Force to just talk about clarifying, understanding, and clearing up a couple of things. So what you'll notice in the policy is everything around conversation that includes the achievement gap, talking about the definition of culture and cultural competency, the inclusion of language around cultural humility, additional language to clarify what culturally responsive teaching is, the definition of equity, movement around ensuring that we're talking about diversity and inclusion. The language that you see that has been removed and deleted has either been moved up or moved down in the document, but also a shift in where you see the language under the guiding principles that was originally there, talking about what the board recognizes and what they will do. There's also language that it clarifies the moving from staff to language around employees, including language about family members and students, but also ensuring that we're talking about assessment and what happens around processes. One of the things that is not in this policy is that there is a punitive approach to what happens around equity and diversity. This work is about capacity building. This policy was written and designed to talk about how we can support equity and diversity district-wide. And so you'll see things around connection, collaboration, support, and sustaining what needs to happen. We are intentionally talking about the barriers that are existing within educational systems, how we can reduce the gaps, and how we can better serve our marginalized communities across this district. Again, not a new policy, a clarification of language, but also intentionally leaning in and addressing things necessary that focus on equity and education across the system here in Washoe County School District.
Thank you, Ms. Young. We're going to go ahead and open it up for any public comment. And then I want to just draw my colleagues' attention. We've had some public, I know we keep up with them, but we've had some public comment to come in, a couple of them since we've been sitting here, some directly related, some kind of indirectly related, but I want to draw them to your attention. And so we can keep those in mind as well. Jeannie, we'll open it up for public comment.
John Murphy.
Welcome, Mr. Murphy. After you begin, you'll have 3 minutes, sir. Wait, let's get your mic on. Hang on just a second. Make sure, there, it's on, we got you going. Yes, sir, thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. My name's John Murphy. I've never done this, so bear with me. I don't really know what to expect. I'm the father of 2 daughters that went all the way through the Washoe County school system from kindergarten. And most recently, my youngest graduated a few years ago from high school. I am strongly opposed to critical race theory being included in the curriculum here in the district. School is not the place for this type of curriculum. It effectively pits students against each other based upon their skin color solely. It doesn't look at the content of their character or anything else. Do my kids have privileges that other kids of different ethnicities have? Possibly. Are there kids of other ethnicities that may have privileges my kids don't have? Absolutely. This is not the time or place. School is here to teach the basics, and that's all it should be. The use of the money and time is better spent just teaching what the school should be teaching. I can tell you, again, as a very involved parent through my kids' schooling, that I noticed a decline in the quality of education as my youngest went through the system. We need to reinvigorate what was there for my first daughter and just build upon what we have, as opposed to adding this curriculum, which in my opinion does not add any benefit whatsoever. I just got this today, so I started looking at it and I noticed all these buzzwords of respect, acceptance, diversity. I'm all for that. I've never noticed it, being very involved, I've never noticed that that wasn't around when my kids were in school. But how do you have respect when you tell one set of kids that are born with the skin color that they're born with some kind of inherent privilege? That's absurd to me. Again, without taking any consideration as to the facts of their life or anything else. It's crazy to me. Also, I noticed in policy 2, it talks about equitable opportunities and outcomes for all. Absolutely agree that there should be equitable opportunity for everybody. I've never experienced anything different personally, but equitable outcomes, I think it's impossible. So nobody is going to have the same outcome regardless of what skin color they are or whatever you tell them. So again, strongly opposed to critical race theory. I ask that you remove it from the curriculum. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy.
Nick Andreishishin.
My name is Nick Andrushishin.
Welcome, sir.
Thank you. And I've been a resident of Reno for the last 6 years. I've just recently been informed of this policy, and to me, it smacks of indoctrination. Teaching, the school system should be for learning, reading, writing, and the traditional subjects. So I see no reason for having this at all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Nicole Harris.
Ms. Harris? Oh, yeah, that's right. Welcome back. Mhm.
Hi. I'm against this policy, the way it's being presented. Equity is very interesting. If we're looking at equity outcomes, then I should be sitting where you are, Dr. Taylor, because I want to have that outcome. And you owe it to me because I'm a woman and I'm a woman of color. That's what it says in my birth certificate. So if you want to have equity for everybody in this room, we should all be able to be trustees. That's not how our system works. You ran for the position, You got elected, and so you're our representative. Equity is really tough to measure and to really, what are you going to do about it? If I can't sit next to him with his job, what do I do? I'm being singled out. It's unfair. And that's what we want to be teaching in our school districts. My dad came here on a scholarship from China. He was not supposed to be here. His eldest brother's son was supposed to take the place and didn't make it. My dad bought US greenbacks on the black market to come here. He didn't ask for equity. He made 50 cents an hour washing bar glasses in New York City. And when a Jewish engineer got their holiday off, my dad did not, because he's Chinese. Why should you have a Chinese holiday? So when you talk about equity, what was my father supposed to do? He graduated from Columbia University. He made his way, he paid his dues. He has 4 children. All of us are very different. We all went to the same school districts. And yet, if you look at all of my siblings, there's no one like me. So should they all be like me standing up here talking? No, it can't be. So when you talk about equality, I think you need to include equal opportunities. That's what we're talking about. I had a struggle for schools. I went to schools in Hong Kong. They didn't look at equity. They looked at me and says, well, okay, you're Chinese, you should know Chinese. I didn't. I got discriminated against because I'm a US citizen, but that didn't buy me anything. So what I'm saying to you is diversity is great. Equity is a wonderful concept, but in reality, it does not work.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Val White.
Welcome, Ms. White.
Christopher F. Rufo produced an excellent video available on YouTube entitled Critical Race Theory. The comments that follow come from his video. Be sure to look for it and watch it.
Okay, I'm going to pause just for a moment, Ms. White. And we've paused your time, but this needs to be about this policy.
It is about this policy.
Okay, I just want to make sure we stay within the confines of open meeting law.
Sure.
Not a problem. Go right ahead. Your time is going to continue.
Equity and diversity are euphemisms for Marxist thought as our social justice and culturally responsive teaching. Here's what equity and diversity supporters believe. They believe that equality under the law is actually racial oppression, just a camouflage for white supremacy and patriarchy. They reject non-discrimination, colorblindness, individual rights, school integration, freedom of speech, and meritocracy. They seek to divide the world into competing racial groups to ensure race-based equality of outcomes. They endorse and seek active racial discrimination to get there. They want race-based redistribution of resources, including at the district and school levels. Board Policy 9210's goal is to create policy with the power to silence opposing voices, punish dissent, enforce compliance, and to completely control resources to enforce equity, diversity, and anti-racism, which is actually racism toward whites. Public schools were established to be neutral, but Policy 9210's purpose is to create a political power to indict those who disagree with its tenets for white fragility, unconscious bias, and white supremacy. The policy seeks to protect the superintendent, trustees, and staff from any responsibility for the unfair race-based mistreatment that will come and will harm those not deemed to be diverse or compliant in thought. You've already heard of third graders being separated into oppressor and oppressed roles. You've heard of curriculum teaching that all white people perpetuate systemic racism. Is this what you believe and support? Our citizens, schools, and nation are already protected by the First and 14th Amendments, the Civil Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act. 9210 is not needed. How about we strive for excellence, a common standard that challenges all groups and backgrounds to achieve their potential? How about striving for equality, the American concept found in our Declaration of Independence, the 14th and 15th Amendments, the Civil Rights Act, and the Voting Rights Act. Delete Board Policy 9210 completely. It's nothing but harmful garbage.
Thank you, Ms. White.
Matt True.
Thank you, Mr. Chu. Just before you begin, I'm going to remind everyone, I need you to wear your mask, if you would, properly. And if it's a face shield, we've been here before, if you can have it down, cover your face, mask should cover your nose and your mouth. That's for everybody, regardless of the side of the issue. We've been this road before. I appreciate you wearing it appropriately. If you can pull your mask, if you can pull your face shield down some, ma'am, I appreciate it. If your mask is not covering your nose and mouth, I would appreciate a change in that. Okay, if you would please wear your face shield appropriately, I'm going to ask you to do that if you would. Okay, if you would have it. Okay, I'm going to ask you to do it. I don't want to have to ask you again. We've been here before. Let's just make this happen. Okay, I appreciate you doing that. Thank you so much. Okay, please go ahead, sir.
Hello, my name is Matt True. I am a longtime resident here in Washoe County. I've raised several kids, as I've told you before. They've all gone here. I attended school in Nevada County, California, and Lander County, Nevada. I did not experience the education here. So as a personal thing, I can't say, but as a father, I can. And I would compliment the school teachers at several of the schools for their help with my youngest son, who was a special needs child. In all other aspects, the school district has completely failed all of my kids miserably. Fortunately, my wife and I pay close attention to our kids and their abilities and where they're at. Therefore, whenever there's conversation going on, my children are much better suited to thoughtful conversation, able to communicate like adults when their friends are not. This breaks my heart for their friends. And what kind of a future do they have when they do not know how to talk about anything without mumbling and looking at their phones and not being sure about what things are? With regards to, how this board is handling critical race theory and all of these other connected issues, I just want to reach out to you guys on a personal level, to search your conscience, your heart. I have a God, and it might not be your God, but I have a God, and I have morals and values that I was raised upon. I do the right thing for the right reason, whether anybody's looking or not. I do not put my politics above whatever my mission is, whatever my duty is. That's how I was raised. And I just would really implore you guys, as you're going through this process, to look closely at your conscience and your heart and throw the politics out. The email we all got on January 6th was a demonstration that some are not capable of that. And that's, that causes for me, a loss of confidence. And I just, that really bothers me because, you're considered the leaders here in the school district, the principals, the teachers, the counselors, the nurses. They all look to you guys, and you set the pace and the tone. And that needs to be taken seriously. There are some very special people working in our school district, especially those working with the special needs kids. So, beyond that, I obviously, where I stand about that stuff. I find it divisive. I think it pits people against each other. I just, my heart kind of breaks to think that that's where we've gone. We've abandoned, the civil rights movement and all of its successes and moved into this other world. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. True.
D. Anderson.
Welcome, Ms. Anderson.
Thank you. Hi, I'm nervous. I've never done this before.
It's okay. Just just breathe. Pull the mask down a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Down. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. You
Okay.
ready? You okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
All right.
I am so impressed by the people that are speaking here tonight. I hope that you do not give up the fight because our numbers are growing. But I would like to say that I took a pretty close look at the Office of Strategies and Ombudsman Services under Mr. Lamarca. And there are 14 departments listed in that office. The 14th one being equity and diversity. So there is in that department, I did a comparison of staffing in the departments, and with the exception of counseling, which is massive because it applies throughout the district, with the exception of family school partnerships and student health services, obviously incredibly important. This department is staffed beyond what the other departments are staffed at. And I'd like to know why, because the other thing I did, oh, I'm so nervous. The other thing I did was look at who equitably benefits from the homepage of this department. And it says that it's who equitably benefits are, they benefit from the curriculum decisions that are made out of this department. Excuse me, there is a curriculum department, and they are highly educated and well-trained people to do that job. Who also benefits? Teacher hiring and assignments. We have an HR staff fully capable. From our gifted and honors and AP programs, I wouldn't say that they're great departments, but they do exist, and they have that responsibility.
Ms. Anderson, this is about the policy of the department, so if you can get to
This
the
is from
policy-
the equity, and this is about the equity and.
I understand that, ma'am, but this is
diversity.
about this,
Okay.
If you can stay to this
Okay.
policy.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to stay within
Since
the
we're
open
here,
meeting law
okay.
rules, okay? If you can do that, I would appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Then go to the website and look at who's going to benefit. There is a department that currently exists to take care of these things. There are laws. All of these departments are capable of following law. And why we need an equity and diversity department that is overstaffed, that has no clear purpose other than to divide and to, I don't know, there are people here who have already stated they've had microaggressions. They've experienced microaggressions in their life. That's what this is all about. It's about dividing people. And if we're going to look at a revision of equity and diversity, maybe we ought to look at ending it.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. I'm just going to remind everyone, if you would, first of all, you already know we don't do applause, right? Secondly, if you can stay focused, you can make any comments you want. There'll be no speaking out. Okay, there'll be no speaking out. Okay, we know that. So if you have comments about anything other than the policy, when we finish this policy, there's an open public policy. Ma'am, if you speak out one more time, I'm going to ask you to leave. Okay, thank you. This is a business meeting. We want to conduct business. You are certainly able to have any public comment you want, but at this point, we really need to keep the public comment on this policy. Anything else, there's an open public policy period right after we finish this, and you're more than welcome to make your public comment at that time. We will not deny that. We never have, we never will, but we really need to stick to the agenda items as we go. I implore you to do that, and I would appreciate you doing that going forward. That's on whatever side of the issue you may be on. We really need you to do that. Thank you very much.
Madam President, could you clarify the applause policy?
Okay, I've mentioned it before at a board meeting. It's about disruption. This is a business meeting. We should not have disruption on any side of any issue. And as the manager of the meeting, as long as I'm consistent in that, then I can set that. And I've worked really hard and tried to be consistent in that. Thank you very much, everybody.
So
who's next, Jeannie?
Ma'am, applause is golf clubs? I'm just
No,
trying to clarify.
as I said before, if it isn't disruptive, I've not stopped it. But when the intention is, and when it gets to disruption, and we've gone through this before, I'm going to have to ask you to not do it and just consider it. I've already warned everyone to please not do that. We don't want that on any side of the issue. Any side of the issue. We want to be consistent in that. Is that clear enough for you, Trustee Church? Jeannie?
To answer your question, yes, so they can applause as long as it's kind of a light.
Jeannie
golf.
next.
Melanie Sutton.
Miss Sutton, thank you very much.
So I'd like to respond. So now it's my turn to talk to you. As far as the young lady that was speaking, you're the one that interrupted her. And she was talking about what, equity? She was talking about equity, and you're the one that interrupted her and took her freaking time. Okay, so equity is not equality. It's all it is dividing us. Equity is Marxism and it's socialism, communism. Okay, MLK, do you know who that is? I don't know, do you? He's the one that moved us towards equality, not equity. So MLK moved us towards us all being equal, right? All you're doing, so the fact that you guys want to remove the history of our country, well, the history of our country, yes, there has been bad things that has happened in the past, but we've moved past that. MLK helped us do that, to have equal people. Don't look at the color of people's skin, look at the content of their character. Equality, not equity. And that was what the young lady was speaking about that you interrupted. And you want to talk bad about us for talking that you're the one taking her time because she only gets 3 minutes to speak. 3 minutes. And you interrupted her. It's equality, not equity. We all deserve to live in this beautiful country, this beautiful state. I love this state. I love this country. And I love all my fellow citizens. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what religious values you have. I don't care. I still love you, no matter what. I don't care what your political views are. It's equality. We all should get along. And you guys wearing these masks and this bull crap right here, all you're trying to do is divide us. The governor already lifted it. So why are we wearing it here? I don't have to wear it at the county commissioners meeting that I go to every freaking week. And I also come here and I will not stop. And then I also told you last week, 1 week ago, I told you I'm going to get as many people out of this school district as possible. Guess what? Took 1 week. No, I'm sorry, 1 day. And I have a church full of people that are going to be at a workshop to be able to learn how to pull their kids out of the school district, because equity is dividing people. We should be talking about equality. So when August comes around, you can count on a lot of lost students in your school district.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton.
Cindy Martinez.
Welcome, Ms.
afternoon.
Martinez. I'm sorry, welcome, Ms. Martinez.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for digging into what I like to do, which is follow the money, dig into the laws and the standards and the regulations. Regarding this policy is emblematic of the balkanization of the United States. And there used to be a set of principles around which a citizenry, a community, and a country would unify. And as I read this policy, I see nothing that addresses setting a high bar of achievement for all to strive towards. Instead, it tries to be all things to all people. Assuming a policy of making sure everything is fair means that those who are exceptional will be at a disadvantage. And when you have kids who, whether by ability, disability, or comprehension, are unable or incapable of achieving the same level as those children or as those other kids, lowering the bar of achievement so outcomes are the same is wrong. And I liken that to what happened to me in first grade. My parents put me in public school for kindergarten and first grade. And my father taught me early to read and to write. As a matter of fact, I got a 0 on a paper in first grade for writing my name in handwriting. I was told to print, I disobeyed, and I wrote in script. Got a 0 on the paper, I remember that. But what prompted my parents to take me out of public school was when the teacher started using me as a teacher's aide to help the other children who were not as fortunate as I to have a parent who was intent on ensuring that my education competence was exceptional. And so what I would say about that Um, I was fortunate that I had parents that understood the importance of having a strong educational foundation. But they also taught me, my last name is Martinez. A couple of meetings ago, I expressed what my ethnic background is. But it was very important that my parents taught me, and I grew up in a different era as what the kids are growing up in now. I was brought up to believe I was an American and that any opportunity was available to me, and any achievement that I wanted to work towards I could accomplish it. And I can tell you, I struggled for a few years after I got out of the Marine Corps till I finally put myself back through school, and I launched myself into a very rewarding career from which I've retired. But I think when you set the bar trying to reach all kids and to teach what is cultural humility? How about teaching children about pride in being a United States citizen? How about teaching them to be prideful of being a Nevadan and teaching them about Nevada history? And instead of demonizing the history that is the foundation of our country. I really struggle with that. I really don't appreciate that, and I have a well-worn pocket constitution that is my permit to pretty much say anything I want, as long as I'm not defaming, abusing, or being inappropriate, shall we say. So I think it's important to be able to say what is on your mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez.
Shannon Coley.
Welcome, Ms. Coley.
In board policy 9210, under the guiding principles, it says district policies, programs, activities shall foster recognition of and respect for basic human rights, fundamental freedoms, equitable opportunities, and outcomes. Those who call for equal outcomes are asking for Marxist tyranny. Equal outcomes are an unachievable goal because of this little thing called free will. There will always be gaps and disparities because human beings are unique and have different capabilities, and humans exert different levels of effort. Equity means equal outcome. No matter how you want to create Orwellian newspeak, that it doesn't mean equal outcome, it does. Equal outcomes require tyranny. I demand the Equity and Diversity Department be renamed to the Diversity and Inclusion Department. I know where this equity train is headed. I know where it's headed. It's headed with the elimination of honors and AP classes. This is the dumbing down of America. This is not theoretical. This isn't theoretical. This is happening in America. They eliminated AP and honors classes in Boston, in New York City, in Virginia, because of equity. This is the illogical conclusion to this illogical idea of equity. We are a few years behind these places, but it will come. My son greatly benefited from the AP honors program at Reno High. He went to UNR. He graduated summa cum laude. He recently turned down 2 job offers from Goldman Sachs because of what he was able to accomplish. Statistics and calculus in high school. He worked since he was 14 years old, and he is so proud, and he turned them down. He beat out guys from Brown and Princeton because of that, from stupid UNR. It matters. It will be eliminated in the name of equity, and it's a shame.
Thank you, Ms. Coley.
Randy Stroff.
Is it Stroff?
Strokey.
Strokey.
Good day.
Good day.
I am a product of Washoe County School District system. My parents moved here when I was 3. I went through K through 12. I graduated from TMCC High School. I am a dental hygienist. I make good money. My husband and I have raised 5 children here. We have 1 left in high school. We have 2 grandchildren that have just started Washoe County School District. We are not only vested in the district, we are invested in the district. We have purchased 4 Prometheus boards for Alice Smith. At the end of another school year where they were out of paper, we bought a pallet of paper and pencils and markers, which is insane. We purchased a 34-piece percussion set for their music program. I am invested in this school. According to Education Week's Quality Counts 2019 report card, Nevada education system was ranked 35th for academic achievement and an overall score of D+ for a national report. According to usnews.com, the highest ranking high school in Washoe County was the Academy of Art, Careers, and Technology. I believe that's a charter school. It had a 64.4% college-ready kids. Not great, not bad. And that's not just one of your regular public schools. Let's go to the public schools. Worcester had the best at a 42% college-ready. Spanish Springs, 30.3%. Reed, 28. Hug, 25. North Valley's 24.8. Sparks, where I graduated, a shameful 19.8%. We should be ashamed of ourselves. You're talking equity and diversity. You should be ashamed. You are here to educate. You're not here to indoctrinate. Get rid of this ethics and diversity program. That is all I have to say.
Thank you, Ms. Stokey.
Kay Weeby.
Is it Weedy?
Blair, L-E-H. No? Oh, is that it? No, that's not me.
That's not you. Say again, Jeannie.
Kay Weeby, W-I-E-B-E.
Miss Weedy? Okay, we'll go ahead and if Miss Weedy shows up, then.
Roger Edwards.
Mr. Edwards, welcome back.
Well, hi there. Yeah, you got to know this is one of my best subjects. I've been raving about this since forever. I've been reading from your own agenda. It says, for employees, culturally responsive teaching and the ability to use the students' families' accumulated and culturally developed bodies of knowledge and skills as an asset to the classroom and school experience, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of these people come from broken homes. What culturally experience can they add from their culture? They have none. First of all, and how does any of that get them through a science test? How does it get them through a math test? How does it get them through a welding project in the welding shop? You got to, it's focus. Like every time I'm up here, I'm talking about focus. You guys are worried about all this crap and you're not teaching the students. Right in the very front, the purpose of the job, this board policy 9210, to achieve a diverse and equitable school community inclusive of, but not limited to, race, ethnic, language, gender, identity or expression, religious and spiritual beliefs. I've never heard you talk about religion one time in schools, and physical and learning abilities. Most of that is not your job. It's just not your job. It's your job to teach them how to weld. It's your job to teach them how to write a letter, how to sign their name, how to do the basic stuff. You're worried about all this. It's no wonder that the numbers that she just read off to you are what you're getting. You got to spend your time on the important stuff, and we're not, clearly. Now, I understand there's a lot of pressure because our students don't have home lives that help teach them about dealing with real life and the problems that ethnic diversity might give to them or make for them, put in their way. But teaching all this and not teaching them how to do the basic stuff that they need to get out of the school doesn't help them in the end. All right, the agenda says recommend a possible revision to policy 9210. I'd like to move that you delete the entire policy.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards.
I'll call Kay Weeby one more time. No. And then by email, we received comment from R. Crump, Bruce Parks, and Michael Grewley.
Thank you very much, Jeannie. Thank you for your public comments. We'll bring it here now to the board table for discussion. Did we miss public comment? Let's see, we'll check and see.
Pretty funny. Roger said, "You don't know my name?" I'll fill out a card when you're ready.
Hang on,
Or I'll
Mr.
start talking.
Hang on, Mr. Eppolito.
I'm hanging.
I had a public comment card on 2.01 for
Well, why don't we do this, Ms.
Yeah, you wouldn't let me
Well,
do that
Hang
one.
on. Let me do this. If you filled out a public comment card and were missed, or if you, Mr. Eppolito, if you didn't fill one out on this agenda item, just do it when you're done, sir. Okay?
I just
We'll
said
go-
I would do it, Angie. He
Okay,
had one
we'll
too.
go,
You wanna go first?
Mr. Eppolito, your time is starting. Let's start for 3 minutes, Mr. Eppolito, and our staff will take care of that.
You do that on purpose. My name is John Eppolito. I'm a former K-12 teacher, and I have 2 kids left in the district. I would like to thank Superintendent McNeil and President Taylor. Over the last 2 weeks, over 100 people have become members of our private Facebook page, Protect Nevada Children, because of the shenanigans you guys are up to. Thank you. This document helps teachers teach, or should I say indoctrinate, children into the concepts of critical race theory. It was posted on the district's website for everyone to see for at least 45 days and possibly up to 1 year. Parents can no longer view the document on the district website, but so far the district won't say if teachers can still access it. The last sentence of the first paragraph, quote, "Can we learn about topics such as police brutality, demonstrating, protesting, and rioting, police militarization, and their roles in upholding or dismantling systemic racism," end quote. That's the conclusion of the first paragraph.
Mr. Eppolito, are you bringing this back to the policy, sir?
Stop the time, please.
Are you bringing this back to the policy, sir?
Yes, I am, Angie, and you know that, and you do that on purpose too, and you're rude.
Mr. Eppolito, your clock is starting.
End of the second paragraph goes like this, quote, "We invite you to engage your students in dialogues about the relationship between white supremacy, white privilege, racism, and police violence in a developmentally and socially responsive way, and hope this document will serve as a guide," end quote. The entire document, since you guys removed it for us, the entire document can be viewed on our private Facebook page, Protect Nevada Children. Right now, it's toward the top of the page. Board Policy 4500, District Speak, was supposed to be heard today. But for some reason, at the 11th hour, you guys pulled it off the agenda, and I believe you replaced it with Board Policy 9210, which is what we just talked about. 4500 is the one that would allow teachers to display flags, banners, and bulletin boards showing support for BLM and LGBTQ, but not things like pro-life or blue life matters. When are you guys going to hear that one? We'll be back. Going back to the riots of last summer, as our cities were burned and looted, Superintendent McNeil never publicly said one word, but on January 6th, the day our Capitol was stormed, Ms. McNeil sent a message to all parents that me and many others thought was very political. You can find her message on our Facebook page also. I'm very concerned that all these items, BP 9200, BP 4500, benchmark advanced supplemental curriculum, and probably many other things are an attempt to push Superintendent McNeil's political ideology on all the children in our district. Please stop.
Thank you, Mr. Eppolito.
You're welcome.
Is there another public comment? No, this, we cleared up?
There's no more.
For the next item, okay, okay, thank you very much. Okay, looks like we've gotten all the written public comment, we have all the in-person public comment, we'll bring this back to the board at this point for conversation, for comment, for questions. Looking, I don't see any lights yet. Trustee Church?
I hate to be first again. Number one, I don't know where to start. I've got a few things to say. I'll try and keep it under 5 minutes. I hope we listen to the well-spoken people that just spoke. I didn't hear hate. I did hear some anger, but I didn't hear hate. And they did, everything they were talking about was about equity. It's found on the equity page, 15105. So whether we're talking about the policy or the equity page, it is all what we're talking about on the agenda. I spent hours going over this policy, reaching out to people in the community for input. And I'd like to quote the famous philosopher, Jimmy Buffett. If we weren't all crazy, we'd all go insane. I laughed so hard, I had tears coming down my cheeks because otherwise I'd go insane. Cultural humility is the ability to maintain an interpersonal stance that is other-oriented or open to the other in relation to aspects of cultural identity that are most important to the person. Cultural responsiveness teaching is a pedology that recognizes the importance of including students' cultural references in all aspects of learning. This, 4 or 5 page policy goes on and on and on. I had to laugh or I'd go insane. It is absolute, I'm trying to be polite, absolute gobbledygook. I couldn't understand it, and I have 2 college degrees. It's certainly not written for the average person. It opens the door. I'm going to quote from somebody that wrote me, not through the board policy thing, but couldn't agree more, read gobbledygook language through the policy. It does nothing but open doors for bizarre interpretations, which most likely is the goal of the policy. The policy is nothing but an I'm not good at those long words, invitation to lawsuits in an attempt to circumvent or rewrite already protected rights in federal laws. When I got done with all this, I said, may God have mercy on our souls. What about the quality of education? We're teaching these policies. We're here for, how much have we spent today? You've wasted so much time of my life talking about these policies that should be dealt with in another issue. Now, I want to talk about a few policies that relate to this. So, and these are just a few. Harassment and discrimination prohibited. Equality and diversity, what we're talking about today. Creating and maintaining a positive culture and climate. Distribution and display of informational materials to students and staff. Political activities in schools. Safe and respectful learning environment. Student behavior. Student free speech. Couldn't we just have 1 or 2 policies and get done with this? I haven't had time. I've been on 6 months on the board, and I haven't had time to read half of the policies. And I'll bet nobody else has. It's just absolutely insanity. So I took the policy and I Googled the word equality, didn't find it once. I mean, this is the Civil Rights Act of 1968 is equal rights. It's nowhere in there. Then I find out that we have a diversity task force, which I didn't know about before, but we just appointed an ELA social justice task force. So I'm like, what other task forces do we have that I don't know about? If we weren't all crazy, we'd all go insane. Then we have Nevada Revised Statute 261 that just came, AB 261, and various other legislative things that come out. We have 3 of 7 new board members that didn't vote for any of this, and 2 more coming on. We have the task forces I mentioned are still meeting or going to meet, haven't even started the second one yet. We're taking money from the quality of education. And if I interpret this right, because this is so wide, you look at those things I quoted, this is so wide to interpretation that I absolutely agree that under this interpretation, if the APs and honor classes are dominated, say, by Asians or whites, that they would be canceled because they're not equitable. Or you'd have to appoint those minorities that didn't qualify to those AP, even if they didn't qualify, because it wasn't equitable. And finally, as was mentioned, religion is in here, and I see nothing about teaching, nothing in our education as a partially Jewish person where we teach the Holocaust. I don't see any religious teaching in here whatsoever. So my point to the board, at a bare minimum, we've got too many things, too many irons in the fire, too many things going on. Let's at a bare minimum simply push this back until these task forces meet. But my bottom line is, you can't polish this. This is bad, bad, bad. You can't rewrite it. It just needs to go away. And we need to somehow come together and sit down and just make all these policies into one or two. But I am just crazy, or else I'd go insane.
Thank you, Trustee Church. Other comments? Vice President Caudle?
Thank you, Madam President. How does the district define equitable outcomes?
Would you like me to answer that? Again, for the record, my name is
Please, Ms.
Tiffany
Young.
Young, Director of Equity and Diversity. When we talk about equitable outcomes, particularly in education, is providing students for what they individually need to reach and exceed that standard of either graduation or college and career readiness. We know that when we have a district at this size or any size, when our students come into a district, a staff member comes into a district, they are all coming in at different levels. And so we know we want to graduate students, but we might need to find out individually what they need to get there. And so that process of equity will include providing the individual needs and resources for what those students need to get to that end goal.
Okay, thank you.
May I follow up on that if I may?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I want, because I have several I want to get to my question, but just because it relates to what he's saying, and then I'll come right back to you, Vice President Carlo. So when we look at equitable outcomes in here, does that mean that we're striving for every student to have the exact same outcome?
Well, the overall outcome is that our students graduate,
No,
right?
but I mean, I don't mean the overall. Of course, we want to. Okay, if you'll please, thank you very much. But if you would just, of course, we want everybody to graduate. Okay, that's. I don't mean getting away from that. Of course we do, but I mean within that piece, does that mean we want every student to achieve the exact same level because that's the equal outcome?
We want the highest standards and expectations for every single student, regardless of race, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status.
If you would, please, I'm gonna have, if you can't not shout out, I'm gonna ask you to leave and then perhaps you can watch on the live stream. This is a business meeting. We just want to conduct it like a business meeting. That's for any side of any issue. We want to maintain an air of professionalism. I will really appreciate that for everybody. And you see your trustee here nodding, so that means he's in agreement with me. Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. So I'm going to restate it because I kind of got lost in there a little bit. We want every individual student to achieve to their individual best, not that everybody has to get to this. Okay, because I think that's important. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, go ahead, Vice President Cole. Thank you for letting me interrupt and get a little clearer.
You're good. I think in this, what is this? It's number 2. Maybe worth adding some additional language to make it very clear that our the mission of outcomes is to raise students up and not to raise students up at anyone's expense. I think that would be helpful because there are examples in other places of the country and numerous areas where equitable outcome has occurred where it's a canceling. To lifting up is the same as bringing others down to create an equal footing. And I do think that as a district, and I've brought this up before, we talk about achievement gaps. When we're talking about achievement gaps, it's lifting everybody up. And I think that as a district, making that clear in board policy, then everything else downstream is going to support that. So I'm going to come back around to that. I'll let people jump in with other things, but I do think that has to be very specific in number 2, that is what we are, that is what the equitable outcomes will mean here in the Washoe County School District. So thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Caldwell. I'm going to ask you, I think I would like to think that everybody agrees that no one wants to pull anybody down, right? In that. And so stating this in the policy answers that question, right? So if you can think about what that might look like in number two, what, as I always ask people, what's your recommendation? If you can think about what that might look like, that I think that will be helpful. Other comments, other comments, other comments. Anyone? Clerk Manetto?
Thank you, Madam President. I looked up the word equitable because I thought maybe I just don't know what this means. And it basically said fair. And there have been a lot of things, that's a definition. There are a lot of things that have been added to it and taken away, and it means something different. And I get that. And we want to make sure that every kid has the same opportunity no matter what. And I'm hoping that's what we're saying here. Because we don't want AP classes to go away. We don't want anything like that. And I believe that there are, and all kinds of kids take AP classes. And all kinds of, all ethnicities, and kids are graduating. I struggle with this somehow. It's what I'm coming down to. And I've taken the diversity class a couple times, and I thought it was a good class. It helped me reflect, because that was the point of it, the training, as far as, I could tell it helped me reflect on me. I'm struggling with this. Maybe I'll listen to you guys and it'll get clear in my head. Thank you.
Thank you, Clerk Manetto. I have a couple of comments, and I see you reaching, so then I'll go to you, Dr. Nicolette. A couple of things. I'll go to what two of my colleagues particularly, and I think Trustee Church was kind of talking around it a little bit. Let's define in this policy what it will mean for us. Okay, and then that way we don't have to think of, there are other things that may be out there, right? And it may be one way, this way, that way, whatever the case may be. But because there's so much concern, right? And I'm not going to say I doubt it. We want to know what it means, because there's so much concern about what this will mean in this policy. Why don't we say, this is what this means for us in the Washoe County School District? Might mean something else somewhere else, right? Whether it's maybe it's somewhere else is pulling people down. Who knows? I don't know. I'm not looking at other people's stuff, right? Maybe somewhere else, whatever. But let us define what we want it to mean for us. And then that would make some of that clear, in that it could mean this, it can mean this, that might happen, this might happen. Let's make it clear from the board standpoint, right? And this is what we want it to mean. So then it takes away that, but it really means, no, let's say, and I don't know if it's a definition or however we might get there. I'm just pulling this out there because I hear what you're saying, and it kind of connects to what Vice President Calder was saying. Let's say in the Washoe County School District. This is what in the Washoe County School District, in this policy, 9210, this is what we mean by that. And then that qualifies that defines it, and leaves less of it open, at least, for people in the public to say, hey, it looks like this, sounds like this, one way or another, right? Let's be clear on that. And that way we answer that. I do have a couple of questions, Ms. Young, if I may, because I think it's important to clarify something. Is there anything in here, in this policy, and I've read it now, everybody in this room has read it probably several times. Is there anything in this policy that speaks to including a group at the expense of excluding a group?
No,
Anything like, you know what I mean?
No.
Okay, because I didn't find it, but I want to make sure, because I know you're intricately involved in writing this, and I don't think that we want to inclusion, even some of the speakers, I'm for inclusion. I think we're all for that, but not at the expense of or with the exclusion of another group.
No.
In particular, the exclusion of white students or male students or whatever the case may be, right? Or smart students.
No.
Okay, because I don't think any of us want a policy that excludes anybody.
Correct.
Okay, so it's important that we note that. Another one, he already talked about that, because I looked at, there was a statement that I think that got a lot. Number 2, it talked about district policies program, and I know Vice President Carlos going to work on this a little bit. District policies, programs, activities that foster recognition of and respect for basic human rights, fundamental freedoms, and equitable opportunities and outcomes. You define what equitable outcomes are. They do not mean the same outcome. I mean, we know crossing, I don't mean globally, we want to walk across the stage, but equitable. Okay, so he's working on that. And I think it's important for us to define what does that mean in this policy? What does that mean for us? So thank you, that was already taken care of. And I have one more question in here because it was brought up as well, and I think that's important as well. Is there anything in this policy, I may have missed it, that will give someone an opportunity that they don't qualify for? For an example, so anything this policy speak to, I'll say black kids because I'm black, right? That say, let's get more black kids in honors courses.
No.
Or let's get, or anything, so we're taking resources from this kid because we want another black kid, we want another Asian kid, we want another Hispanic kid, we want another gay kid, whatever.
No.
Is there any that would say this, take it from here and give it to here?
No.
Because I heard that concern as well, and I didn't hear that, but I want to make sure, did I miss that in here? Because I don't think any of us are saying that either.
No.
That's all the questions I have at this point anyway, but there may be more. I reserve the right to come back. Okay, you may be ready. I saw Dr. Nicolette, and then we'll go to you, Trustee Church.
Clearly, this is an evolution, and we have been, I will use the term, fighting about this and concepts and notions for a very, very long time. That's why we have the Constitution. That's why we had many wars. Having said that, I do want to say that I'm a little concerned about the confusion with the terms equity and equality. You know, it is complex, and yet it's really very simple. When we're talking about our students, okay, let's remember why we're here. We're not talking war now, our students. Equal means we give every kiddo the same thing. Doesn't matter who you are, what you are, you all get the same thing. That doesn't work. That doesn't work.
Hey, hang on, no, hang on.
I went to a most beautiful graduation today of special needs kiddos. 3 of them graduated. They were given very different experiences. Thank heaven, thank God, thank their parents, thank our teachers. Thanks taxpayers for the money. This needs to be really thought of. Equity is giving a child, and it's in here and it's very clear, what they need to succeed. If you give every child the same thing, they're not going to succeed. So there's a diversity there. There's an inclusiveness there that we must provide for our students to the best of our ability. Equality and opportunity, of course, but equity for what's going to help them succeed. I do have some challenges with this, and I respect the people that wrote it because this is tough work. Like I said, we've been working on this for hundreds of years. Well, as long as humanity's been around, quite frankly. I also want to remind us that I know, so that you know that I know, families, no matter the dynamics, are the first and forever teacher for a child. And we must always respect that. And every family is not equal in how they help their child for many, many, many reasons. It's not a judgment. So we have to help our families differently. Equity. I do think overall, this is too much. I think it must be simplified. I think that we try and define words in here that are very complex. Cultural competence. Culture by its nature, there's books written about it. So I would like to simplify it a little more. The very beginning here under the purpose, the Board of Trustees seeks to appreciate. Quite frankly, I would have to suggest that we shouldn't just appreciate, we need to enact. It needs to be something that when our teachers get up in the morning, they know that they're going to give our students to the best of their ability what they need to succeed. We're not going to appreciate it, we're going to enact it. And I feel very strongly about that. I would have to say, I'll say, Tiff, I love this. I absolutely love this. It's the most important one in here, I believe. Jeff, I'm just like you. Can't find it when I need it. Let me find it. I will get it. Okay.
Let us know where you are when you find it.
Yes, you bet. Thank you. Page 6, it used to be E. It's under accountability and transparency. Transparency is not my favorite word because sometimes that's kind of what people want you to see. Nonetheless, that's a personal opinion. Providing ongoing and open communication to keep all stakeholders, I would say, and especially families, informed of the district's goals and progress as they relate to the principles of equity and inclusion. This is the beautiful part for me. It gets back to what we're all here for, I believe. Within the context of the board strategic plan, school performance plans, and it will all be embedded in the district's equity and inclusion. It actually points to that our goal really is about student success, all of this aside. So my thought again is that let's go back to the drawing board here and keep working with some good stuff, but I think we have more work to do on this policy. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. We're going to go to trustee Church, and then trustee Thigpen has his hand up as I.
All right.
as
I actually do
understand.
have some questions. Also, just for the record, I gave a handout to the board, and so that is public record when I started the meeting. Question, and I think this is Dr. Lamarca. Am I correct that this policy, like other policies, basically would then authorize the superintendent to adopt rules and regulations not subject to board approval?
Yes.
Those are regular, are you talking about administrative regulations, trustee Church?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, regulation is the role of the superintendent and administration.
So she would base those, she being the present superintendent, obviously, would base that on this regulation, her interpretation of this regulation, of this policy, I'm sorry.
That would probably be where she would start, yes.
Let me say something that might add a little clarity. The way it should work is the board develops, once it's approved, go through all the process, yada, 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 right? We make the final vote on the what, right? And then the administrative regulations should be the how of that. It shouldn't be anything outside of what we said as the what. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so
Okay.
that actually, you gave me a great question I hadn't thought of. The current board policy 9210 exists. As a result of that, am I correct that the superintendent has developed regulations, regulations or administrative rules?
I believe so. I don't have the admin regs, and are there admin regs that accompany? The
No,
question,
there are
will you
no-
restate your question, trustee Church?
Sure. My understanding is as a result of the existing policy, the superintendent has in fact developed regulations, or rules based on the existing policy.
This policy, you might want to address that to the superintendent, right? Since
Well,
they're
whoever
administrative.
of the three.
So as far as for equity and diversity administrative regulations,
Yes.
so.
Whatever you use this guide for and said, okay, now we're going to make some regulations.
So those would be based off this particular policy.
I
So
can give
I
an
think the
exa-
answer is yes.
Okay, so let me give an example, and this is a very, very sensitive subject. So, but we can't dance around it. We have to confront this. Gender identity, we have a written policy, which I have somewhere, that authorizes, for example, biological males to compete in female sports if they identify as female, potentially stay in female lodging on road trips, potentially apply for female scholarships. We have a regulation, specifically I've seen it and I can pull it up. Would that be a result of this policy?
Trustee Church, that would be the result of the policy that aligns to.
So which one would that be? Wouldn't that be this one? Equity and diversity, because it talks about gender identity.
That regulation.
I'm sorry, go ahead. One thing I will say is Please, can we just keep it down? Please, 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 please. The last thing we want to do is ask someone to leave the meeting. We
And
don't want to
I'm
be
not trying
involved
to
in-
be.
I'm sorry, trustee Church, if I may.
I'm sorry.
The last thing I want to do is ask anyone to leave. So let's just allow that to happen. The board doesn't speak when you speak because that's your time. So just allow this, if you would. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Superintendent McNeil, I'm sorry.
No, it's all right. So if you're talking about the gender identity policy, the regulations would be based off of that. And as President Taylor stated, it would be the how in order to implement that particular policy. And that policy has actually been in place, I believe, since 2017.
Yeah, so it's an excellent example of what we say here, what we do here today is going to result in very controversial issues, which would point to the need to provide us as a board from the 30,000 foot level to provide guidance so that the staff can act. So a question, I think mostly Dr. Lamarca, but whoever, section 6, disproportionality. We talked about this at a previous meeting. The overrepresentation of a group of interest in comparison to the can you discuss basically what that would mean for us as a board?
Can you say which number? I'm on.
Number six,
which
first
one?
5 is culture, 7 is diversity and inclusion.
Wait, can you have I'm sorry, I can't find it.
Oh,
Can you say
I'm
it,
sorry,
please?
I'm sorry. I was actually looking at the existing policy and I'd have to go back to the other one.
Okay, let's
That
try
would be page 4 on the new policy, number 7.
Thank you, I'm so sorry.
Thank you very much. Okay, just want to follow. Dr. Lamarca, I think you addressed that to Dr. Lamarca, trustee Church?
Because we talked about it before, yes.
Sure, I'll try to take a stab at what you're asking. So within the population of students within Washington County School District, there's a certain percentage of students that, for example, have IEPs. And then there's a percentage that don't have IEPs. Okay, just so roughly speaking.
Can you define IEP for those who may not know what that is?
Individualized education plan, students that receive special education services. So generally speaking, I don't have the data in front of me. Let's say 13% of the students in the district have IEPs, 87% don't. If everything was proportional, then you'd see that in terms of participation in sports. You'd see that in terms of participation in certain elective courses. You'd see that in terms of participation in a variety of different programming that we provide. Disproportionality is when we take a look at that and we see that there's a marked difference in those proportions. So for example, in the area of discipline and suspensions, while 13.5% of our total population might be students with disabilities, they may be making up closer to 30% of the students who are being disciplined. Is there an explanation for that? There are probably a variety of explanations for that, but we would define that as being disproportional. And the goal would be to make sure that we aren't contributing to that we're supporting students so that they're not being disciplined. That's an example of disproportionality.
Okay, now I'm not talking IEPs, but let's talk race. So we have a disproportionate number of students of a particular race that are being subject to discipline. What would we do on that?
Well, so in terms of the definition of disproportionality, it would be the same. So if 5% of your student population in general is African-American and 20% of those being disciplined are African-American, we have a marked disproportionality. Then you look at the reasons for that. Okay, so when we talked to you previously, one of the things that we did demonstrate or show this to the board at a previous time. We'll pull the data. We've talked about sharing more data with you. African American students were disproportionately suspended for similar offenses. So at first blush, the answer might be, well, they're doing something more than another group of students that's resulting in discipline. But for the same behaviors, they're being suspended at a greater rate. That's disproportionate. That's something that we have to look into because we have to determine why is that happening.
So then we look into it. Then what do? We correct it?
If I may, I would think it depends upon the rationale, right? If there's a reason for it or not, right? I
It
mean,
does. I'm not sure who's asking the question though, whether it's Mr. Church or people behind me. But
okay.
so part of the how would be in teaching culturally responsive practices. That would be part of the how. That would be helping folks understand that they have some implicit biases that may be affecting how they perceive a particular situation.
I think the key, if I may, just because disproportionality is I think is a really important topic for us, is taking a look at if they are similar infractions, but the penalty for those are disproportionate, then that say, hey, there's a problem for that because there's a similar infraction. And that's the way you look into it, not just pure numbers, just because something has to be wrong. You look into it. Always, you look into it, you say, I mean, this is a similar infraction, and this is disproportionate, which is a national issue, by the way, right? And so it's one of those, hey, we got to dig into this and see, hey, are there things that we're doing as a district that might help to lead to that? The key thing there is it's a similar infraction, and the penalty is disproportionate. That's what's key. Similar infraction. Otherwise, it's not. There may be other reasons for it, but if it's similar, but it's disproportionate, gosh, we better look into it because we want our kids to have to get the same treatment, right? We want to be fair to everybody.
And it kind of, to me, it just kind of opens a Pandora's box. But let me shift gears a tiny bit. And I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but this is a very good discussion. So if we have a football team, soccer team. I played soccer and we came in last place every time. And we came in last place against teams that were largely Hispanic and grew up playing soccer. So if we have a sports team that is disproportionate, would that be cause of concern?
Well, when you say the sports team is disproportionate, Trustee Church, can you please clarify for me, please?
I'd say based on ethnicity.
Well, we can't determine that it's disproportionate based on ethnicity if the students are attending school in their zone community. So we cannot determine that it's disproportionate if they live in that community and attend that school. So it would not, in fact, be disproportionate. It would be representative of the community that they live in.
What if Galena High has 40% Hispanic, but 90% Hispanic on the soccer team? Would we go, something's wrong, or would we say that's just the way it is?
It would be something that Galena ought to take a look at. It absolutely should. But what I can tell you, and I appreciate your example, what I can tell you is data around extracurricular activities, it's not the cleanest information that we have in terms of our information system. So I want to be upfront in saying that. However, based on what we do have, we see that ethnic minorities are disproportionately underrepresented in participating in extracurricular opportunities. We know that extracurricular opportunities are often the very hook that gets a child excited about education. So as a district, we do want to identify if there are barriers to extracurricular participation. Is it transportation? Is it fees? What is it that we can address to hopefully get a student engaged in any possible way?
Okay, you segued a little bit. Is it possible, based on that hypothetical soccer team, that the school district could order a change or direct a change or try to implement a change in the makeup of the team?
Are you referring to the Galena example?
Yeah.
I don't know why they would. I'm not being facetious. I don't understand the question.
Mhm.
If I'm the administrator at Galena and I have 40% of my population is Hispanic, but 90% of the students on my soccer team are Hispanic, am I going to make sure that all students feel like they have access? Am I going to make sure that they have access? Absolutely. But I'm not going to force other kids from other groups to try out for a team. And I'm also not going to take Hispanic students off the team if they're in fact superior athletes. But as an administrator of that school, yes, it's my obligation to look at every programming opportunity I have and ensure there's equitable access.
And again, I think I've made my point that this opens a Pandora's box. And in fact, In fact, earlier we kind of heard, no, 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 we don't discriminate, but now we're going to go, we got a problem here. We might have to do something. I mean, what, for example, and I was on the soccer team. What if the soccer team, you have a white male that says they don't speak English. I can't hear what they're saying. They don't kick me the ball. They told me that I don't belong on this team. Now, then we would have a problem, right? And we would deal with it.
Well, an interesting example, excuse me, and then I'll yield. Worcester High School, for several years recently, I think it's probably 2 years since the student graduated, they had a football player who played and he was deaf. And so in order to provide him access, we had an interpreter on the sideline that helped that child be able to play every day. So I would want to make sure that that student, if that's what they're experiencing, some sort of a language barrier to their participation, that we do our best to address it. I believe that's what Dr. Nicolette was talking about. It's differentiated approaches. You meet students where they are. You give them what they need to be able to succeed. You can't succeed for them, but you make sure you're not putting things in the way of that.
So if a person said, they're not speaking English, I can't understand who's doing what with the ball, they're not kicking me the ball, and I'm the only white guy on the team, that would be a cause of concern, and we would look into it. I'm not talking about the deaf kid, I'm talking about this.
It should be.
I think I guess, well, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I guess my point is that I think that's probably farther in the weeds than this conversation beyond policy. And if a student has a concern, we would hope that the student would go to the school coach or administration and let them know that they're having some challenges so that they can seek the supports that they need to be successful. So whether it be language and that being a gift, or whether it be an inability to hear in our deaf community, whether it be one of our LGBTQIA++ communities, or any of our students that are represented by our various socioeconomic communities across this district, I would hope that at that level in the weeds, that they would be able to handle it at the school level, and that we're building capacity for them to see that, address that, and support that, but not in a punitive fashion.
I guess I'll just close, excuse me. I just think we need to first of all, I think the policy just needs to be thrown away. But if we do go ahead with the policy, because of all the things I raised, I think I made my point. It needs to give clear guidance from the 30,000 foot level to staff and not just these 50-cent words. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Church. Council's going to weigh in a little bit on your question about board policy and how it relates to admin regulation. I don't think we quite got all that clear, and we want to make sure it's clear for the record and for all of us, really, not just you.
Yeah, I think for the record, and I think Ms. Young was going to probably go there, was board administrative regulation 5161 relating to gender identity is actually not adopted pursuant to this policy at all. It's actually adopted pursuant to policy 5100 and board policy 9200. Board policy 9200 comes right out of the Civil Rights Act. So it deals with Title 4, 6, and 7, as well as Title 2, Title 9, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act, Individuals with Disabilities Act, and Age Discrimination Act of 1975. And basically the policy adopts what is required by the federal law. Board policy 5100 is related to NRS 388, which is the safe and respectful learning environment policy, which specifically states that no one shall be bullied, and I'll paraphrase here, based on their gender identity. There's also a list of several other criteria, but one of which is gender identity, which is also protected in the state of Nevada and protected pursuant to other federal laws. So consistent with those, Administrative Regulation 5161 is our gender identity policy. So 9210 has nothing to do with it. And I think as Ms. Young and Chief Lamarca pointed out, this is more of a policy on how we can achieve these things, not a in the weeds, if you don't do it, you're punished type thing, which I feel is the tenor of the, was the tenor of the discussion as it related to 5161. And so I just thought the record should be cleared up on that. That 9210 does not address 5161 is not related to 9210.
Thank you, Council. We're going to go to Trustee Thigpen. I know his hand was up, and then we'll go to Vice President Cottle.
Thank you, Madam President. I certainly think this is good discussion, and I think, of course, we'll have disagreements, but we're always respectful to one another, and I appreciate that. I was just thinking on what Trustee Nicolette had talked about in terms of the definition of equity and what it would mean for us at WCSD, and I kind of looked up what that is in terms of educational equity, and it is defined as a measure of achievement, fairness, and opportunity in education. And I feel that this policy accomplishes that. When I think of equity, and I was writing down some examples from all of the 24 schools I've had the privilege to visit, this is to make sure that students have every support needed to make it to college and career readiness. I think of the food pantries we have, kids who are hungry, they're not going to be able to focus. We have our communities and schools that we partner with that help make sure that kids have clothing and school supplies. We have ADA access for students. I've witnessed teachers and principals spending extra time with students ahead of a big test. Finals were, happening, and I saw a student struggling with that and a principal lending a hand. And that we're making sure that students and their families also are aware of all academic opportunities and avenues, no matter what their background may be, which this policy outlines. So those are all, to me, examples of equity, and that is what equity means to me. So I think the policy, as I think Trustee Cottle mentioned, helps to lift all students up, and all means all. We're here for all students, no matter their background. So I think we just have to try and keep that in mind, and try and stay out of the weeds as much as we can. But those are just kind of my thoughts overall.
Thank you, Trustee Thigpen. Vice President Cottle.
Thank you, Madam President. And that was a good example about the Worcester football player, whereas the interpreter gives that equitable access, or else it'd be really unsafe to be out in a football field. So talking about the outcomes, I put together something real quick. Curious what the board thinks. In thinking about this, it would probably be good to have this in definitions so that it wouldn't have to be listed every single time. But what I have is equitable outcomes is the lifting up of all students to close achievement gaps and opportunity gaps while not impacting other students in the allocation of resources and opportunities.
So then what that does is basically, and I was just thinking in my head, is that what we need in this policy is something that says what it does and what it doesn't do, so to speak. And that's basically what you said. This is what it does, but it also doesn't do that, right? It doesn't impact the resource allocation or what have you to it. Because I think as I hear some of the concerns from those who came for public comment, I think there's a real concern that this is going to go over here at the expense of here, right? Is going to those higher achieving students versus, students that struggle, whatever the analogy, whatever may be, whether it's achieving academically, whatever the case may be. And that in this district, I can just speak for this district, right? That in this district is not the intention of equity. The intention of equity, I was writing some down, and actually you gave me a note on that, is really talking about something that should allow all students to achieve to their fullest potential. Is going to be different for every student. Maybe, as you said, we went to the graduation at Piccolo today, and man, what an amazing experience that was. Man, those students need a lot more. That's equity. That's equity. That's what equity means in this district. It may be something else. It may mean something else somewhere else, but in this district, that's what equity means, that we're able to do extra things for students that need the extra help, right? And so we should define it so that, because one of the frustrations I have is people define stuff as like that, but that's not what it means. Then let's define it, right? Let's stay with it. And I think that's really, I think how you defined it may be the way to get that. So it's very clear right here. This is what we mean by equity in this district.
Yeah, and so before I make my comment, I'll make that an official motion So is
Okay,
there-
can you repeat that one more time? Because
So we
I don't
have
know
it-
if Jeannie picked it up. Oh, it's
You
up on
got
the
it?
board. Oh, I don't have my glasses on. Okay, I gotta turn around.
So I'll make that an official motion, and if we can get a second, I'll just say something real quick.
I'll second.
Okay, we got a couple, okay, I got felt trustee Calvert's hand before I heard you, trustee Thigpen. So now we can have a discussion on that motion.
Yeah, so for me, it goes back to, we can't bring anybody down while lifting others up. You don't gain anything, you just cancel it out. And I think that's really important. And we talk about, let's talk about AP, and we can't say, well, we need more resources for this group of students, so we're going to take AP resources and put it here because we got to lift them up. The AP students then lose AP and then they come down. Then what did we actually accomplish? We didn't accomplish anything. I mean, maybe some people say we did, but in the whole, we didn't. So I think it's important, if it's in the policy, then as it goes downstream, that is abundantly clear from the board. So now when the admin regulations created and when it is executed in the district, there isn't any confusion on what we're talking about when we say equitable outcomes. And it would make me feel better. So.
President Taylor?
Dr.
comment
Lamarcus,
just
I was like,
briefly?
where'd that voice come from? Okay, yes,
I apologize.
that's okay.
I just want to draw attention to the word resources. And I totally understand the intent of your comment, and I agree with it personally. We do need to recognize that, for example, we have Title I schools that are allocated additional resources. We do have to recognize that, for example, in certain special education settings, there are lower student to teacher ratios. I'm only drawing that to your attention because there are at times differences in resources. So every classroom across the district does not necessarily receive the same resource.
Yeah, and I'm good with that. What I think where I would see the difference there is that we get special education funding from the state, we get Title I funding from the federal government. We're not taking funding away from somewhere else to do that work. And so I think I hear what you're saying, and I understand that. I think we're still okay because that's not happening. Once we start taking away, and this is what's happened in other school districts across the country, it really has, gifted and talented, AP, we're seeing a reduction because there are resources being put somewhere else with great intentions. But what about what we got going on here? That needs to be clear so that we're not doing that in this district. So that's where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Carlo. We see the superintendent and then trustee Church.
No, and just to back what Dr. Lamarca was speaking about, this goes exactly to what you were referring to as far as supplanting versus supplemental. So Title I are supplemental dollars, Title II are supplemental dollars, Title III for English language learners, IDEA dollars, those are all supplemental dollars. They're not supplanting additional resources for students.
Thank you, Dr. McNeil. Trustee Church?
I just want to be clear, we're not voting on the entire policy. This is simply that one paragraph.
This is just on that one paragraph. Any more discussion on that one piece? Okay, there is a motion on the floor that we make the changes that we've all seen and can read on the screen. Okay, it was made by Vice President Caldwell, seconded by Trustee Calvert. Seeing no more discussion, all those in favor of this change, please indicate so by saying aye.
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 Any opposition? The motion is carried. Let the record show that this change is unanimous. That's just pertaining to this change as pointed out by Trustee Church. Something that I would like to see in here, and this may be in terms of looking at equity, and it really our intention being so that every student individually can can achieve to their greatest potential. So it isn't we're looking at this group versus that group, or it is that every individual student have the opportunity. I love what you said earlier, Dr. Lamarca. We can't do it for them. right? And I don't think our intention is to do it for them, but that opportunity, right? The opportunity is there for that student. Again, whether there be the great, the example that you gave around the Worcester football student, but that student still had to be good enough to play, right? So we couldn't say, coach, play that kid, but the students still had the opportunity, right, to still be able to be involved. We didn't have a barrier. We were able to remove a barrier so that students could participate. That's a great example. Same thing when you look at soccer. You're not going to make a coach, hey, let's go ahead, let's take from Hispanic kids and make sure a white kid plays and so on. But are there barriers in place that keep white kids from being on the team? We don't want that, right? We want everybody to have that opportunity. So I'm looking. Would you read because you're noting, and I was kind of peeping. I was hustling, looking over your shoulder, but I like kind of a statement that you said that because you take a bunch of notes all the time, that speaks to really equity being about allowing each student to achieve to their fullest potential.
You were looking over my shoulder.
I was looking over your shoulder.
So the section where Vice President Cottle, under policy, so I'm on page 4, number 2. There we are. So district policies, programs, and activities shall foster recognition of and respect for basic human rights, fundamental freedoms, and equitable opportunities and outcomes for all students to achieve to their fullest potential. Period.
And one of the things, thank you. One of the things I like about that is equitable outcomes, not equal outcomes. It's a lot of conversation. What we want to keep talking about equal outcomes, and you're right. We cannot determine equal outcomes. We cannot make that happen. The word is equitable outcomes, and they're outcomes so that everybody has an equitable opportunity. Everyone has an opportunity, not an equal outcome. So it's very different. Because you're right. I'm going to agree with that. We can't determine that. We can't make that happen. We can't do it for them.
To their fullest potential.
Comments on that from my colleagues, we think. I think Eugenie's putting that as a potential on the screen, but certainly not in there until we all see it. Trustee Nicolette?
Yeah, thank you. I support the concept 100%. Context is challenged, but this is about a 30,000-foot view policy. I like it because each student has a potential, and it's up to us to do our best to ensure that we help them reach that potential.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. If we go on this, I'm looking to see if it's the pleasure of the board, before we go into further discussion, is there a motion to this to continue the discussion, or is there still more conversation before we're ready for that? Don't see that quite yet. Go ahead, Clerk Manetto.
Thank you, Madam President. I kind of struggle with the word outcomes, because the outcomes are the measurable things that here it is. But the opportunities make sense to me, but the outcomes, so maybe somebody can.
How would you change that? Is it recommendation?
Take outcomes out.
So it would look like, go ahead and read that and see, read that and see what you're.
Okay, district policy, programs, activities shall foster recognition of and respect the basic human rights and fundamental freedoms and equitable opportunities for all students to achieve to their fullest potential.
Okay, comments from the board? Okay, I hear the recommendation. Okay, comments from the board? It's not a motion, so it's conversation. You want to say a little, counsel?
I guess I would just point out, I think, and Trustee Cottle or Vice President Cottle can correct me if I'm wrong, I think he added the equitable outcomes definition to address this specific section. So what I would suggest, if I'm presuming I'm correct, and you can tell me if I'm not, but I would take out the word fundamental, where it says fundamental freedoms and equitable opportunities. I would make that a list. I would take off. So I would have it read like this: fundamental freedoms, equitable opportunities, and equitable outcomes, period. And then the term equitable outcomes is defined above where he created the definition. I think that was his intent when he created that.
Yeah, it was my intent to make sure that it couldn't be interpreted that equitable outcomes meant that at the end, everybody has to be at the same place. And that's where the risk comes in to lift these students up. We're pulling some students down for a variety of reasons. So that's why I did that. So if we take out outcomes, we could probably leave the definition. I guess it makes it clear in case for regulations. But I mean, I if there's will of the board, I'd be okay taking out the outcomes and just leave the definition if that's what we are looking at.
If the definition doesn't need to be there, though, if we don't talk about outcomes in here, right? I mean, I don't know if this is the only place where outcomes is. Maybe if it's a list, as council said, and maybe it says as defined above after outcomes, to make it really clear that it relates to that definition. We had unanimous approval on the definition, right? So it's the way the board feels like this is what our outcome should mean. And then it makes it really clear that it can't be something else that somebody else comes up with someday, right? But that it's as defined above, which makes it clear that it doesn't mean we're taking away from anybody. It doesn't mean we're looking for everybody to end up at the finish line at the same exact spot. It takes that out of that if we add that piece on there then. Dr. Nicolette?
Thank you. I think we're getting into the nuances, but I personally like the word outcomes, because if I say, okay, Diane, I'm going to give you an opportunity to do the best you can on this algebra test, but I'm not going to look and see what the outcome is. So you give a student an opportunity, but you're not going to follow through with the outcome. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. So I might need a little help with that one.
Vice President Cottle?
Yeah, I think the way I look at this is I want to make sure that every student starts the race in the same way, the same time, and that we do everything we can to help them finish the race, but they're not all going to finish the race at the same time. So I think that's where my brain goes. It's just how do we make that look? But I think about it as a race. Not a race, but that's how I just think about it.
Marathon.
Yeah, it's marathon.
Well, for some people it's a sprint, for some people it's a marathon. I mean, they go through it very differently. I would, and I don't even know if they all start the same way, quite frankly. That isn't part for us to define. Part of it, if you're a special needs kid, you don't start the same way as everybody else,
Right.
right?
Where opportunity is.
Yeah,
you know?
right. No, it's from an opportunity standpoint, sure. In my mind, saying as defined above on outcomes clarifies that piece and makes it so that it keeps outcomes in there because there should be a goal, but it clarifies that it doesn't mean anything crazy. You know, you can't make up your own thing. And what we mean by that is right here, right? And that seemed to be. We don't have a whole lot we're not in agreement on a whole lot on this one quite yet, right? Don't know if we're going to get there, but that is something we all agreed upon because it was a unanimous vote. So I would look at it from that standpoint. So see what that looks like above. So what the recommendation was to make it kind of like a list council, as you said. Jeannie, can you draft that out and see what that looks like? Oh, you're doing it?
Yeah, I'm doing it.
Well, you said it, so.
Yeah, I thought I kind of did make it a list. I took the way I punctuated it. I put the commas in there.
Oh,
so
like
it
that. I'm
reads
sorry,
like
I
a
meant
list.
bullet points.
But sure, I can.
No, it doesn't have to be. Just put as defined above. I think it's important after outcomes. It's just part of for our consideration, part of our conversation. So the board can see what that would look like.
You want it like that?
No, I would maybe put it whatever way that makes it very clear that as defined above is connected to outcomes.
Well, I use the same term, equitable outcomes, which is also the term used here. So you see what I?
Yeah.
So,
I just want to refer back to that definition by equitable, by outcomes.
okay, equitable outcomes.
Yeah, I want to make it really clear because I think that's the intention of the conversation that we're having here.
How about that? I could just do it like that, as defined above. Or am I?
And then for all students to achieve to their fullest potential.
Go ahead. Yeah, that was the other piece of that.
You want that back in there? To achieve to their fullest potential.
Okay, that's to look at, and I hope you can see that, Trustee Thigpen.
Yes, I can.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say, I see you're nodding. So if it's the pleasure of the board, we can consider a motion on this piece.
make a motion.
Okay, trustee Thigpen, go ahead.
I make the motion to accept the changes to section 2 here.
Okay, as stated on the screen, is there a second to that?
Second.
Motion by trustee Thigpen, seconded by Dr. Nicolette. Any further discussion on just this piece right here? Okay, trustee Church?
Yeah, just for the record, I'm going to oppose because you put chocolate on a cow patty, it's a cow patty. The whole board policy is unacceptable, so I'm going to oppose.
Okay, thank you, trustee Church.
I want to respond to that so that you know where I'm coming from, and that is that I don't necessarily disagree, but I see this as a little bit at a time. And so, and this is difficult work, and it's a little mind and soul bending. And if we take this a little bit at a time, I believe, and with public input that informs us, I mean that sincerely, we'll get there.
Thank you, Dr. Nicolette. Clerk Manetto?
Excuse me. Thank you. I think since we put the as defined above in there, I don't know. I still have a hard time with equitable it's a me thing, I'm sure. So
it's okay. There's no, I mean, it's, yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, that piece is defined above, but you got to get to a place. You got, is there a way that looking at it that might, is there something in that might, that could change it, that might make you feel like it takes care of that apprehension for you?
I think what I'm thinking, and is that with equitable outcomes, I'm thinking, and I'm not thinking race. I'm trying to think race, but I'm not. I'm thinking, then doesn't that mean we all get the same place at the same time? And there we are. But
that's equal. That's equal.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
I think just go back to the definition of equitable outcomes that we approved, and then make that piece clear. I mean, I think it's important that I'm just hearing from our colleagues, and even hearing, I'm like Diane, you get some informed, some like Dr. Nicolette, you get informed from some of the public comment, and I think it's really important that we are not saying everybody ends up at the same place at the same time at the end of this thing. I don't think that's anybody's expectation. I don't think any of us think that's a good idea, and it's certainly not realistic. Anything else? Okay, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a motion on the floor? Did I lose it? Yes, there is a motion on the floor. Okay. There is a motion on the floor to accept the changes right here to number 2. I'm saying right here, but it's really right here, as stated on the board. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye. Any opposite? Oh, sorry, you made the motion, so I assume that. Thank you. I get it. Any opposition?
Nay.
No.
Okay, the motion is carried. Let the record show it is 5-2. It is 5-2. That's just on this piece. Okay, other discussion on other parts of this policy. Should there be, trustee Church?
Yeah, again, I think I made my position clear, but could you possibly address the 50-cent words to make it clearer for a 12-year-old or a high school kid or something?
Can you be specific, sir?
All the definitions that I read, and it's in my handout. Cultural responsive teaching, cultural humanity, cultural proficiency as examples.
Okay, so you're saying that you want that defined differently, or
Well,
help me?
I hate to even go there because again, the whole thing I just can't accept. So I don't want to waste a lot of time unless we send out for pizza. But these are 50-cent words that I can't understand. And then we're providing guidance to staff. Unless they have PhDs, I don't think they're going to be able to know what it says.
Okay. Thank you, trustee Church. If there's something, a recommendation you have for making them easier to understand, they're defined. If there's something that, then you don't, okay, all right, thank you. Other comments, questions, suggestions on other parts of this policy? Again, the only thing that I guess I'll ask my colleagues, is it clear in here that the intention, and that might be your change, the change that we made on definition of equitable outcomes, that the idea is not for everyone to end up in the same place at the end of the road. Just want to make sure that my colleagues feel that that is clearly stated. Because I do think it's important to say what the intention is and what the intention is not. Vice President Carter, that may be there. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I think the hope is that everyone would get to the end of the race, but basically can't rig the system so it happens.
Mhm.
And so the hope is there, but I think reality tells us that that may not happen, and we have to do what we can to help it along, but we can't rig the outcome and then say, hey, it happened. I think so I hope that we would do it, but
I see.
Not necessarily that's how we're gonna, gerrymander the whole process to get there.
That's not the intention, is make sure we're going to keep filling them with this thing until everybody ends. Gotcha. I hear you. Okay. I hear you. All right. Anything else? Clerk Trustee
I
Calvert?
think maybe Tiffany or Dr. Lamarca, is there something in place where we have kids that are at a point where they're in the achievement gaps? How do we deal with that? Or how do teachers deal with that? And are there resources that can be identified to help them to possibly move to a different level?
Thank you for the question. I think generally speaking for all students, what you're describing is part of our multi-tiered systems of support process. So all students are basically provided opportunity for core instructional practice. If for whatever reason they're not responding to that, then we provide interventions, and that would be what we call tier 2. If they continue to not be responsive to those interventions, then they can be very specialized interventions. That would be tier 3. If a student continues to struggle over time, it could be a situation where they might be eligible for special education services. The real crux of this policy is to strengthen tier 1. It's to make sure that equitable practice is occurring at the base level so that we have fewer kids that we need to intervene with. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Dr. Marker. Did that cover that for you? Yes. Trustee Calvert, okay. All right, then if it's no other changes or anything, looking for a motion, if it's the pleasure of the board, we're considering the entire policy as changed. Policy 9210, and then just as a reminder, what this would do is forward it to a full meeting of the Board of Trustees. And then should it be approved at that level, could be changed still, as long as they aren't substantive, right? Could be changed at that level. And then it would go out for 13, that's a preliminary approval, I think is what we call it, preliminary approval. And then it will go out for a 13-day public comment period, and then come back to the board. And then should it be approved, or it can be changed again without substantive change, or it can be sent back to the policy committee for that matter. Then it takes 2 approvals, I guess what I'm saying, at the board level to be a part of policy. So again, looking for a motion if that's the pleasure of the board.
Madam President,
Yes, Trustee Thigpen?
just want to make sure you can see my hand up.
Yes, I didn't see your hand up. I was taking a note. Go ahead.
That's okay. I make the motion that the Board Policy Committee provides preliminary approval of updates to Board Policy 9210.
Thank you, Trustee Church. Trustee Thigpen, I'm just going to correct that a little bit. It isn't really preliminary approval. It's just that we forward this policy as changed onto the full meeting of the Board of Trustees.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Are you okay with those kind of changes? Okay, there's a motion on the floor that Board Policy 9210 as changed be forwarded to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. Is there a second to the motion? Okay, don't hear a second. I'll second the motion. Okay, I'm allowed to do that, so I can actually make motions, but I don't typically do it. I'll second the motion. Let's put it out there for a vote. Let's see where we are. Okay, the motion on the floor from trustee Thigpen is to send board policy 9210 to a future meeting of the Board of Trustees for consideration of preliminary approval. All those in favor, please indicate so by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's do a roll call vote on this. Okay, Jeannie, if we may, just to make sure, I think that was 4, but let's just make sure.
I just call each name.
Just call each name, yes, ma'am.
Trustee Calvert. Trustee Nicollet. No. Trustee Minetto. No. Trustee Taylor.
Yes.
Trustee Cottle.
Yes.
Trustee Church.
No.
Trustee Thigpen.
Yes.
Okay, 4-3 is what I got. Jeannie, did you get that? Okay, the motion carries 4-3. Let the record show us 4-3. And so what will happen from here is it will go forward to an upcoming meeting, don't know when yet, of the Board of Trustees for consideration for preliminary approval, after which it will go out for a 13-day comment period should it meet approval at that point. Thank you, Dr. LaMarca, and thank you very much, Ms. Young.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Can I just say
Thank you.
something really quick? I really
Yes.
do want to appreciate and to thank Dr. LaMarca and Tiffany for coming today. This was a difficult meeting, and I just want you to know that I support you as the superintendent. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Superintendent McNeil. A lot of great work being done out of our diversity and equity department. Maybe misunderstood a lot, but there's a lot of great work being done there. We certainly appreciate it. All right, now we're on to closing items, public comment. Do we have some general public comment, Jeannie, to hear?
Yes.
Okay.
Melanie Sutton.
Welcome, Ms. Sutton. You know the routine? Just get your mic on. No, not yet. She's working. It's going to turn red on by the microphone. It'll turn red when she gets it on. Let's see. All right, we got you. Go ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon, or is it evening? It's afternoon. Actually, my ADHD is kicking in. I don't even know how to respond to you all. First of all, I don't know if you guys noticed, but normally I wear it says apparently I piss off snowflakes, my shirt today, but I should have worn the one that says you're entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts, okay? Because equity is not what you're saying. You cannot change the definition of equity, okay? It's not just Washoe County's definition of equity. There is a definition, and you cannot make up your own. This is so ridiculous. Like I said, obviously against CRT, Miss Taylor, you took off your mask for a short time to take a drink of water. It was very nice to see your beautiful face. Okay, so I'd love all of you guys. Hopefully one day, the governor said it was okay for us to take off our masks, right? Why are we still wearing them? All it is creating division. And like I spoke just a bit ago, I want to be united. I love Nevada. I love our country. I want to be united. Stop dividing us. Stop it. And like I told you again, I am homeschooling my kids because of this. I don't want them to go through this. And I also told you that I'm going to try and do my best to get everybody I possibly can out of this school district, because what you guys are doing to our children, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Why can't we just work together, like making up your own definitions for equity and equality? Like, we all are equal. We're all born in the United States, and we should be proud of that. We were born here, and we should love our country and not divide us and get rid of what MLK did. Like, what are we doing? That's the whole point of history. Learning history is so we don't repeat it. And you guys are doing that. You guys are repeating history, dividing this country. I don't understand what you guys are doing. I don't. And I've never spoken in public prior to this whole pandemic. And I've been coming here for the last, 8 months. And I go to every single county commissioner meeting for the last 8 months, trying to I told you last week that Stanford came up with a study where there's more than 35 adverse effects of people wearing masks. And then also the CDC came out a few months ago saying that masks help 2% of the time, but you guys are still wearing them.
Thank you, Ms. Sutton.
Nicole Harris.
Welcome back, Ms. Harris.
This is the third time I'm here. I thought I would not be speaking. However, there are a couple of things I like to share with you. Number one, I would really like to see more diversity with equal outcome or quality for specifically the Social Justice Task Force. I like to be considered on that. I do not see any yellow faces, quote unquote, or Asian faces or Chinese faces. And if you look at the demographics of this county or the school district, you will see that we're underrepresented. So I think one of the things we need to do is really reach down in the weeds to find Asian students and parents who are willing to come out and share their cultural experiences with you of what it was like to grow up in communist China or cross the boat in Vietnam and almost died and still raised 3 children, and they all have gone to universities in California. I can give you personal stories for those. Most of us do not come out to speak in public. I'm probably one of the few exceptions. And so I would really like to be appointed on some sort of commission, whatever you have, to represent and to work in our community to get them to come out and share their experiences, number one. Number two is, I don't understand why a board member cannot bring up subjects on the agenda for future discussion. If you are being fair and equal, why would you silence any particular person on the board? That doesn't make any sense to me. And it would be like me not being able to come up here to speak on every item that's agendized. Because you said, well, we just don't think you should be speaking, Nicole. You've had your chance. That's not fair. That's not what this country's been known for. Everyone has a right to speak. Everyone has a right to share their ideas. That's what we're founded on. And yet I see this board not following their own directive, their own decisions. And that is very disturbing. So we, the community leaders, would very much like you to consider some of these options, some of these ideas. They may be foreign to you. However, I think we can all work together. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harris.
Val White.
Welcome back, Ms. White.
I wasn't able to get this in when the item was being discussed, but this is about 1505 visitor management 1A1 and 1A4 that limits or denies visits to school sites. It's a very convenient policy for someone who has something to hide. And the policy makes it convenient to block any viewing of schools because all student hours are instruction or assessment. Define distraction, as that just about covers anything that the site administrator doesn't want to deal with. No, you can't come because you're a distraction. It completely removes the rights of citizens to see what our taxpayer-funded schools are doing. Apparently, WCSD needs to be reminded that schools are not the personal domains or kingdoms of administrators, although they like to act like it is. Another part recommends excluding the school or a school activity, anyone who disrupts the educational environment. Give me the definition of disruption. I want to see it. Does that include a trustee like Jeff Church, who is only allowed by a school handler to see what they want him to see? What are you hiding? The drug use going on in classrooms? Teachers already indoctrinating students into CRT? It's absolutely incredible that a trustee can't show up at a school and ask to see what's going on without a handler. It's trustees' responsibilities to be sure that schools are functioning safely and delivering a taxpayer-funded activity worthy of our taxes. The excuse that student safety is the reason for limiting public access to see what's going on is frankly complete garbage. 3, Why is legal counsel, Mr. Rombardo, having private sidebars with the board president at this open meeting? Why is he seated where he is on the dais? No other board I've seen places legal counsel in the center of the dais. He's not an elected official, but is offering opinions that are not legal in nature. No one elected you, Rombardo. You need to be silent unless you're asked for a legal opinion. And last, no employees or trustees have ever lied. If no employees or trustees had ever lied to the public before, I'd be more inclined to believe Miss Tiffany's assurances that no students will be harmed by this equity and diversity policy. The only thing that matters is what's in print. If everything is good with policy as she stated, then change every appearance of the word equity with equality. How about that?
Thank you, Ms. White.
Janet Butcher.
Welcome, Ms. Butcher.
I just returned from a 5-day trip in Iowa.
Ma'am, just if you pull your microphone up a little bit higher, people can hear you better. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I just returned from a 5-day trip in Iowa where it's still America, the land of the free and the home of not pushing oppression Marxist ideology. I missed last week's meeting in person, but I was able to watch it afterwards. I listened to paid suits and union people who spoke out about older people making uneducated comments and inferring that we are uninformed. If you listen to people today, they were not uninformed. There were a lot of in-depth, intelligent conversations. While these suits are entitled to their opinion, we are entitled to our facts. I appreciated the counselor today saying, the council saying today that we are here to educate our children. Let's do that. Let's not indoctrinate them. 1 + 1 is 2. It's not CRT.
Thank you, Ms. Butcher.
Eugenio Gerskovich.
Sir, I'm going to try your name, but help me if I get it. Gerstrovich?
Very good. Eugenio Gerskovich. It's a little bit difficult because I am an immigrant to this country. First thing I like to say is what I'm noticing, that is the board against the people who elected you. I haven't heard so far anyone supporting what you are doing. I am not new to some of the proposed policies of this board, like critical race theory, which is a form of discriminating against white people, or teaching sex or unnatural sex to children before or at puberty. I have to repeat what many of the people here have said, like I request the board to limit our schools to teach basic skills and leave out the Marxist indoctrination of our children. Thank you. I am one more. I haven't heard anyone opposing what we are saying.
Thank you, sir.
Cindy Martinez.
Welcome back, Ms. Martinez.
Thank you, ma'am. Cindy Martinez again for the record. And I appreciate, well, I have a different perspective on how a governing body ought to consider policies and that sort of thing. As I heard and watched you go through all of these, the last policy, the equity policy, it seems to me the appropriate thing to do to not burn up your time as well as the time of the citizenry, as well as staff who has to stay here past dinner time, Those kinds of points should have been raised, and it should have been sent back to staff to clean it up. That's what should have been done. At least that's what we used to do in what they used to do in the agency I worked for. And what I would say about that, the agency that I worked for had 2 governing entities, a 3-member board and a 5-member commission, and each that had statutorily defined qualifications for members of those entities. And that ensured objective and autonomous regulatory oversight of the industry for which they were responsible. And respectfully, most of you on the board come from the education industry, and you are phenomenally educated. You got advanced degrees. And my thought about that is that's admirable. But the problem is you come from the very industry that you're seeking to fix, change, or guide. And it seems to me an appropriate thing would be for trustees to be from diverse industries. You don't have anybody on here from finance. You don't have any tradespeople. You don't have CPAs. You don't have anybody from fill in the blank, any kind of different backgrounds. And I would posit that trying to fix a problem with the same mindset that creates those problems is problematic, because you're speaking into an echo chamber. So while you do have reasonable ideas and thoughts, as I listened to your equity staff here that presented this policy, and you know, the industry I came from, the agency, was responsible for regulatory and statutory enforcement. And I can tell you, when you get a bunch of attorneys together with a computer and a pen and they start thinking about things that need to be changed, you end up with statutes and regulations that end up in conflict with each other. And what I heard is that there are policies here that appear to be in conflict with each other, and that's a problem. The other thing I would say is the superintendent and legal counsel should not be arrayed with our elected officials. They should be off to the side, because there is an apparent sharing of power here by the president and the superintendent, which is inappropriate and gives a wrong impression, I feel, that there's some kind of power sharing thing here. And I think that the superintendent is accountable to the Board of Trustees, and the Board of Trustees is accountable to we, the people, the citizens of Washoe County. And I think that the superintendent has been given too much power for a lot of things that are going on in this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez.
Rita Pepe.
Welcome, Ms. Pepe.
Thank you. I've been sitting so long, it's hard to move. I first want to say that policy 9210 is very confusing. And that's all I'll say about that. I was here last week to stand with a large group of people who were here to oppose the benchmark curriculum on critical race theory. Many people that I speak to every day are also opposed to critical race theory. And there were more people here last week who opposed critical race theory than those who are for it. So why are we spending more money to form a task force to study critical race theory? I feel that you are not listening to the parents, grandparents, and other concerned taxpayers who have a vested interest in this community. And I feel that this is wasting taxpayers' money. Critical race theory is racist, divisive, and its main goal is to tear this country apart. We need to teach children how to read and write, do math, art, history, science, not how bad this country is. This country is the greatest country in the history of the world because we have been blessed by God. And the way things are going tells me that God's blessing is being removed. We have We have the longest standing constitution in the history of the world. It's over 2 centuries old, and there are a lot of countries that their constitutions don't last that long at all. And you can't achieve equal outcome for all students because you can't control their effort. You can give everyone an equal opportunity, but what they do with that opportunity is up to them and their effort and up to them and the effort that they put into the opportunity. I have one last thing. I feel that we need to spend some money on a bigger flag for the pole out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pepe.
Chris McAvoy.
Is it McAvoy?
Christine McAvoy.
McAvoy.
Yes.
Welcome,
I-
Ms. McAvoy.
Thank you. Basically, I just kind of got rid of everything I was going to say other than listening to what everybody has said today and all that you have said back. I just would request that the Washoe County School District ban critical race theory and social justice type curriculum and just say it. You're done, you're banning it. It's not going to be taught in any of our schools, and that's the end of it. That's what we're asking for. We want that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McAvoy.
Paul Larson.
It's hard to know where to begin. There's so many topics here that we could cover, but first thing I want to say is I want to make it clear, if there's any question about it, that the only flag that should fly in a classroom under any circumstances is an American flag. We that served at the frontier of freedom where it was nothing but hammers and sickles in front of us, I mean, we sent people home under that flag. You send a folded up flag to the mother, to the wife, to the children, and to fly any other flag under any circumstances is entirely disrespectful to the sacrifices that were made. And I understand where people they feel strongly about issues, but I mean, we could put up the Don't Tread on Me flag, we could put up the Blue Lives Matter flag, we could put up the Appeal to Heaven flag. All of these flags mean something to people. We could put a Christian flag, we could put up those, it escapes me now, the Muslim radicals flag, ISIS, we could put that up, but for us to be one people, to be a melting pot, to respect each other equally under our Judeo-Christian heritage, under God, we're all created equal, and we need to respect each other. The American flag is the unifying symbol of us all. And when we served, and when the police serve, the idea is that we protect the entire community, not any one faction of it. So we need to come together as a people. Otherwise, this divide and conquer doesn't benefit anybody in the long run. And so we realize there have been wrongs that have been done. I heard 2 meetings ago when we had all left and the teachers came up and said, all those 100 people that just spoke were Ku Klux Klan. They said that, Ku Klux Klan, white supremacists and haters. And that couldn't be further from the truth. So we need proper definitions. We aren't here to suppress anybody. We believe in civil rights. We hashed out that in the 60s, and we're way past that now. And so all the Jim Crow laws, we remember when that was in effect, and it's repugnant to all of us, just like the German generations hate what their grandfathers did to the Jews. And they should not be punished for it forever for what they had nothing to do with. And so our young people, they all need to be treated with respect and not pitted against each other. United we stand, divided we fall. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Larson.
John Eppolito.
Mr. Eppolito, welcome back, sir.
Thank you. My name is John Eppolito. I'm concerned that if several people in this room didn't show up, that you guys would have passed Board Policy 9100 as presented. I'd like to thank everyone who showed up. Once the agenda for today's meeting was posted, I asked for the proposed changes to BP 9210 4 times. I believe it was Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Monday. The 9 pages were not made available until yesterday, 1 day before this meeting. What you did may not be in violation of open meeting law, but it sure seems like the district is playing games. Just one more reason many of us no longer trust the president and superintendent. My oldest child graduated in 2016. My youngest will graduate in 2023. As an educator, in those 7 years, I've seen a diminished education for my children. The question is why? In my opinion, it's due to 1, increased screen time instead of education. I think the district and this board spends way too little time on attempting to improve education for our children and way too much time on things like BP 9210, equity and diversity, board policy 4500, district speak, the proposed social justice curriculum. A moment ago, there were 5 district employees in this room. They made a total of over $1,130,000 per year in 2020. That was an average of over $226,000. And we know some are way above that. Not the board members. We know you guys are pretty much doing it for minimum wage, and I thank you also. Thank you for your service. Now that Superintendent McNeil has publicly shown her political bias on January 6th, I'm concerned about her doing many things. One, to write the administrative regulations for Board Policy 9210, picking the Social Justice Task Force, and frankly, I'm concerned about her writing any administrative regulations on any board policies. I've made it to 60 without knowing the difference between equity and equality. I don't know if I quite have time. I was going to give a bit. Yeah, I do. My personal situation, I'm half Sicilian and half white. To say it nicely, my white grandparents were not crazy about Italians. They had 5 grandchildren, 2 like me, half Sicilian, half white. I had equality, quote, the same resources for opportunities. I did not have equity, quote, the exact same resources and opportunities needed to reach an outcome, end quote, as my white cousins. But by most measures, I'm more successful than the 5 white ones. That's why I can spend all this time at these meetings. Please stop dividing our community and focus on educating our children.
Thank you, Mr. Ippolito.
You're welcome.
Roger Edwards.
Welcome back, Mr. Edwards.
Hello, Roger Edwards for the record. Must be on, yeah, all right. I got such a kick out of, we had the 2 administrators here, Young and DeMarco. And I guess they're responsible for crafting the changes and not the whole 9210 itself that was there before them, possibly. But I was just amazed that Trustee Church stumped him with a simple question on how he explained equity, and he couldn't do it. And he wrote the policy. You got to be kidding me. These 2 folks, are they responsible for a policy that increases the amount of qualified students that we graduate every year? You need to fire them. You need to fire them. Yeah, I'll guarantee you're paying them more than you're paying teachers, that you could hire maybe 4 for what you're paying those 2, and that would increase the turnout from your schools. Come on, people, focus. EIPs, first time I ever heard of that. Do you guys start in the summertime and start interviewing every student and crafting an individual education plan for 61,000+ students? My money's on, no, you don't. Well, you know what? Let me tell you a little story about a guy who went to school, South Sacramento, 50 years ago. Every class had 35 students in it, only because that's all the chairs they could fit in the rooms. They'd have been more if they could got them in there. And I was the minority there. And you know what? We had equity, we had fairness. We all had one algebra book, we had one German book, we had one science book, and we all studied out of the same one. We all got the same classes. And we all got the same test too. We didn't get a test for Asian or white guys or fat Mexicans or anything else. And you know what? That was equity. And you know what they turned out? I think it was 75% graduation, qualified graduated students. That was equity, folks. We get off in the weeds with all this other crap, and we're not teaching our children. We're not graduating qualified people that can go out into the world and be a contributing member. Quit worrying about sexual identification or what other nonsense and all this other. This is a policy that these folks, spend all their time trying to craft, and you can't even sell it. It's too complicated to even enforce, even to put in. You can't put in a policy that reads like this. Come on, teach the kids, please.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards, and thank you for your service to our country.
Mark Sutton.
Welcome, Mr. Sutton.
Thank you. Mark Sutton for the record. First off, I'd like to say I'm here to speak against the critical race theory in our schools. This gentleman sitting here that wanted to pretend he was speaking for all of us back here has no idea what we have to say. So when it comes to proportionality, and his examples given were that African-American students were being suspended for similar actions at a disproportional rate, what does that say about you guys? Because this is your job. Isn't it the superintendent of schools that is responsible for dealing with discipline in the schools? So now I would like to read from a brilliant mind. His name is Dr. Thomas Sowell. He's a senior fellow at Stanford University Hoover Institution. The next time some academics tell you how important diversity is, ask how many Republicans there are in their social department. Racism does not have a good track record. It's been tried out for a long time, and you'd think by now we'd want to put an end to it instead of putting it under new management. This is a brilliant man. And I'd like to see y'all think about me putting my trust in a failing school district to teach my children what they need to feel about equity, equality. That's my job, not your guys' teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton.
Matt True.
Welcome back, Mr. True.
Hi. All right. So I had a little snippet here out of some of the curriculum that was going to be provided for the ELA. And I just had the very first beginning things I started to read, just for the fifth graders, okay? And it's not necessarily the words or the facts or even the truthfulness of what is being said, but it's how it is framed that is concerning to me. So bear with me. I'll try to do this quickly. Selection specific discussions questions. Creating the Constitution, page 4. We the people is a loaded phrase that at the time really just referred to white males. Most, in all caps, of the new nation's population was left out of the fine print because of the framers' omitted essential words and protections for women, people of African descent, and Native peoples. Have students work in you need to have students work in collaborative groups to discuss how omission in law has contributed to the systemic racism and bias, i.e. economic, health, and housing education. Question: what has been the legacy of being left out of consideration by the men who wrote the Constitution? Next, it says, create the Constitution. Creating the Constitution, page 5. The framers of the Constitution were far from perfect. Many of them white men who fought in the Revolution and War and wrote the Constitution, enslaved people and stole land from Native nations, and while still being upheld as the founding fathers, in quotations, of the country. How does white male privilege allow people to have a false sense of self? How does that impact what is acceptable and what is unacceptable? Mrs. Stowe and the president, page 20, asks students to reread paragraph 3 and 4, Mrs. Stowe to the president. What do the descriptions of Mrs. Stowe's somewhat shy, blushed, brokenhearted suggest about how women were supposed to feel, behave in the company of powerful men? How would you rewrite the paragraph portrays Stowe as a strong and courageous woman? Next, it says Liberty Medal acceptance speech, page 25. Ask students to read paragraph. The summary: Shirley Kumar, judges for the Supreme Court, serve for life. They are nominated by presidents and then appointed by Congress. Despite the rule of law, judges sometimes make decisions based on bias. That they do. Consider Dred Scott and the case of the Shelley family. How did bias play into the court's decision, Dred Scott? How does bias come into Shelley from? So they want the children to then graphically represent the relationships between the social groups, privilege, oppressions, as well as impacts, both negative and positive. Okay, so I don't know if anybody understands where I'm coming from on this, but if we don't have confidence in the Supreme Court nominees because they're men who are fallible, and the Constitution writers are founding fathers because they are fallible, then we're looking at school teachers who have their own opinions, who have never really left the state because they grew up in public education and then university, and now they're working for the state. They're not very diverse. Anyway, that's all I have time
Thank you,
for.
Mr. True.
Thank you.
Jeff Church.
Trustee Church, welcome.
Thank you very much. Yeah, welcome. I hadn't planned to speak today, but I thought we have a good group here, so I will. I requested to attend the same diversity training as well as our 4,000 plus employees. And for the record, it's a 2-day course from janitor to admin, except for trustees. That requires either overtime or to pull them out, for example, teachers out of the classroom or bus drivers out of the buses, and yet we have a critical shortage of bus drivers. Again, pulled out either for 2 days or literally hundreds of thousands of dollars in overtime. So I received, to my request, and I was going to attend at my expense, my 2 days out of my life, the diversity training. Here's what I received. Good morning, Trustee Church. Thank you for your email and request. Please know that it is not in the best practice of our trustees nor the leadership team members to attend department or school-based trainings for the fact that it tends to change the dynamics of discussion and conversation. That would most certainly be the case for our equity and diversity training. Staff may not be able to speak freely and express themselves. And having a trustee or LT member at the training tends to put a chilling effect over the learning environment. The equity and diversity trainings are conducted for individual offices, departments, and schools. They are not something open to enrollment for participants. Respectfully, Kirsten. Holy smoke. Holy smoke. I have a need. I have an obligation. I have a responsibility to know what those hundreds of thousands of dollars in overtime are going for and what's being taught to our people. I'm the trustee. They work for me. They work for us. And we can't attend that training. They are so timid that they can't speak because I'm sitting in the classroom, or perhaps the dynamics would change and what they were going to say, they don't want me to know. They don't want me to know what's really being taught in that classroom. I mean, there's so many things I could speak about in my 3 minutes every time I come up here, since I'm not allowed to speak on non-agenda items while sitting over there, it's like, what am I going to talk about this week? And I was almost tempted since the policy meeting not to speak, but I felt that, again, I must. So I will close with a famous expression: if we were not all crazy, we'd all go insane.
Again, everyone, if you would please. Thank you very much. Thank you, Trustee Church. Jeannie, is there any other public comments?
No, there's no more.
Do you have any that were emailed in that we need to
No.
cover? No, not at this time?
None. There's no more.
All right, everybody, that was agenda item 3.01. The meeting is now adjourned. The next policy committee meeting, we don't meet in the summertime. We will not meet in July, but we'll meet in August after school begins again on August 17th. Thank you very much. And thank you all for attending to lend your public comment. We're adjourned.